we get if there's a lot of noise in this area too.
Hey, John, Dave Paul is asking if you can unmute his phone. So he must be the 774.
Yeah.
There he is.
Hey guys, thank you, Gary. Thank you, John.
Hey,
No problem.
Dave.
My laptop's still booting up.
No
I have
worries.
this old one at home that I never use, and I thought when it booted up Thursday, I was waiting for updates. I did it 20 minutes beforehand, and right at 7 o'clock, it freed up. But I didn't think it was going to ask for updates again tonight, but it did.
Dave, aren't you a IT/data guy, analytics guy?
Yeah, but I have my work laptop that I use all the time. This gateway that I'm using is probably 10 or 12 years old. So yeah, that is a little bit of an oxymoron, Gary. I would agree.
Just giving you a hard time.
I know. It's like me teasing you about bike riding, right?
Yes.
There you
exactly.
go. So it's 7:01. Let's see, I don't see Frank yet or Rob. Is that it?
No, there's Amy. Amy's there.
Yep.
Yep, just Frank and Rob.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we have to start because it is that time. Is HCAM ready?
I believe HCAM is already recording.
Okay. All right. So good evening. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of April 27th. As a preliminary matter, this is Muriel Kramer, the Planning Board Chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So for that matter, it would just be board members and then whoever's in the audience. As I call your name, Planning Board members, please state, just answer in the affirmative that you are here. Gary Trendle. Gary? Present?
Sorry, Gary Trendle here.
Jane Moran?
Jane Moran, present.
Rob Benson? Dave Paul?
Dave Paul here.
Frank Durso? Mary Larson Marlowe?
Mary here.
Amy Ritterbush?
Amy Ritterbush here.
Deb Feinbrugh?
Deb Feinbrugh here.
Okay. So staff members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Gelsich?
John Gelsich is present.
Ms. Pemberton?
Stephanie Pemberton present.
I don't think we have Mr. Paradis tonight, do we?
We do not.
Okay. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Good evening. This meeting of the Hopkinton Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020. Due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. It will further include several public hearings. Actually, a public hearing tonight. For this meeting, the planning board is convening by video conference via Zoom as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda and how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or more of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care to not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured in the recording. The meeting materials, all supporting meeting materials have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Now, turning to the first item on the agenda, before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After the members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of public commentators, we will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. What we will do is John Gelsich, the principal planner, will keep track of who has raised their hand. If you can use the raise your hand feature in the chat box to indicate when you would like to speak. And he will make sure that I know who is waiting to speak, and we will get to everybody in turn. Every vote tonight is a roll call vote, which is mandated when you're not all in the same place. So for any vote that we take tonight, I will call on each member individually so that they can respond in turn. So while I was reading that, did we pick up Frank Durso
No,
or Rob Benson?
no.
Okay, all right. I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Gary Trendle, so moved.
Amy Ritterbush, second.
All those in favor by roll call vote, Muriel Kramer, yes. Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb,
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Gary,
Gary Trendle, yes.
Mary,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Amy,
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
Dave,
Dave Paul, yes.
and who am I missing? I apologize. Did I get everybody?
I think so.
Okay. The first item of business on tonight's meeting is the continued public hearing for Maspinock Woods. The applicant has requested a continuation to a June meeting. So I was just asking John before the meeting started about our dates. We have a meeting June 1st, and we have a meeting posted for June 22nd, which would be annual town meeting if it is held. So I will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for Maspinock Woods. Does the decision have to be continued as well, John?
Yes, they've requested a continuation of the decision as well.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to June 1st and the decision to June 8th.
Gary Trendle, so moved.
Amy Ritterbush, second.
All those in favor? Muriel Kramer, yes. Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Gary?
Gary Trendle, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Amy?
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
I missed you, Jane.
That's okay. Jane Moran, yes.
And Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Okay. All right. So the only other items on the agenda are the articles for the zoning articles for town meeting. So let's see. Oh, yeah, it is. I'm sorry. My screen is a little bit small for me. I have to turn it up here a little bit. Hold on. So the first one is the sign bylaw, and I think I'm guilty of extending that perhaps unnecessarily. Any members of the planning board have any comments or questions or things they would like to bring forward about the sign bylaw? I see Deb Feinberg.
Yes, I'd like to add a fourth item on that list that would read, business owners will be required to maintain temporary signs in accordance with existing sign bylaws, and will be kept in good maintenance, protect the right of way and pedestrian safety while displayed as determined by the zoning enforcement officer. Should I speak to it or what?
Sure.
I think the reason, one of my big concerns is not necessarily with the number of signs, that there's 4 signs, but that it could become uncumbersome by the number of businesses on the street. And very easily in a windy storm, they could be knocked down and into the street, into the road, which is going to be narrowed for construction. And I just want people to be aware of those types of situations, that they're responsible for them. So I just thought it would help.
All right. Does anybody have any members of the planning board have anything to ask about that or speak to that?
I just think it's a good idea.
I'm sorry,
Deb.
that was Jane. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. Go ahead, Jane.
Deb, thanks for that. I think it's a great idea.
Mary?
Yeah, I think it's a good addition. So no objections.
Anybody else? I can only see 4 people at the moment. So, all right. I'm happy to include that. Are there any members of the public who came to speak to this particular proposed zoning bylaw change?
So, Madam Chair, if I may jump in, I don't know if this would be allowed to be added to the language, since the language that was submitted for the warrant has already closed. So since this is adding language to what was posted in the warrant, that may not be allowed. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
So at the time of town meeting, it would need to be brought up as amendment.
Yeah, that would likely be the route.
Okay.
Or the other option is if town meeting is somehow postponed, or certain articles are postponed, the select board may reopen the warrant. But
Yeah.
at this point, I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think it hurts us to just leave this open until we're able to meet closer to town meeting. I don't think it's controversial, and we can, in the meantime, find out. I think, John, you're probably right, and it would need to be an amendment. But we can find out what that is. We can just keep this open and continue this. I would recommend continuing all the zoning articles to June 1st, no matter what, but it's premature to do that right now, just so that we can hopefully meet in person and have the public there when we're doing it. Anybody have anything more they want to add to this? Okay. The next
No
one,
members of the public have raised their hand either.
no?
No.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to talk again about the proposed amendments to the Hopkinton zoning bylaw for the commercial solar photovoltaic overlay district. Mary has prepared a presentation, so we're going to start with that.
Okay, and I'm going to let John pull that up. Essentially, some of my colleagues here have helped to expand the very brief presentation that was presented on Thursday when we last spoke about this. And this was just for clarity, and because of some of the questions that came up from the public, it was apparent that that the information we presented was not sufficient to answer everyone's questions. So this first slide is simply the zoning map as it exists today. Green is agricultural, yellow and buff colored are residential, and pink and purple are business and industrial zones. You can go to the next slide. John? Okay, there we go. Okay, so our current zoning bylaw for the commercial ground-mounted solar installations, they are allowed, commercial solar installations are allowed anywhere in town, all zones. They are subject to planning board and conservation committee review for screening, setback requirements, as well as wetlands protection. But if a project meets the special permit criteria and is not requesting any waivers, the planning board cannot deny the application, even if neighbors object. This is something that that is obviously, I mean, and I think all of us, you know, when first elected to the planning board, didn't necessarily know that that we cannot legally reject something if it meets all the criteria. All we can do is negotiate appropriate setbacks and screening. And as it stands today, in terms of our bylaws overall, there are no restrictions on cutting trees, except on the scenic roads and the right of way. But for any property owner, for any use, including solar installations. So, so when we're talking about, we'd like to limit the clear cutting for solar installations, technically speaking, any property owner can clear cut their land. And there's no town permit to allow that. They have that right. Okay, next page. So the proposed amendment to our solar bylaw essentially just adds a solar overlay district to our zoning map. So, and the purpose, you know, that we talked about within zoning advisory committee and with planning board along the way, in the process that we followed, our purpose was to place some town control over the location of new commercial ground-mounted solar installations, to minimize deforestation, specifically for solar installations, if possible, to minimize the detrimental effect on residential neighborhoods as much as possible. And we also wanted to continue to meet our own town objectives and the Massachusetts state objectives to encourage use of solar. But we wanted to balance that with the issues about, you know, residential neighborhoods and the view and so on. And as is the case in all zoning, we were working on balancing the rights of property owners with the rights of the abutting property owners. So that was the purpose. Next page. Is the process that we followed in the zoning advisory committee. We researched options for solar bylaws that complied with Massachusetts state law. Because prior to this, we understood, I think we all understood, there to be very limited restrictions possible in a solar bylaw. So we reviewed the use of overlay districts in Weston and Wellesley. And we reviewed progress with planning board for feedback through the process to make sure that we were on the right track with what planning board had in mind. We requested town council advice as part of our ZAC discussions, and were advised, not in writing, but verbally, that an overlay restricting solar to certain parcels was feasible and was unlikely to be rejected by the state attorney general. This was discussed at 5 separate public ZAC meetings between October and January, including the criteria for the selection of parcels. So we created an overlay map with limited parcels for the initial planning board review, and the planning board process began in February with public forums in preparation for our town meeting. The town council issued an official opinion in March 2020, as they do on all proposed zoning bylaw changes, and that's excerpted later on in this presentation. Next page. So the parcels included in the overlay district, if this does pass through town meeting and it becomes an overlay district, projects on such parcels will still require a special permit, including the planning board Concom approval process for adequate screening, setbacks, protection of wetlands, stormwater management, etc. The parcels, any parcels not included in the overlay district, if they are desired to be used for a solar development, will have to go through town meeting to be added to the overlay district prior to applying for a special permit for ground-based commercial solar. Next page. Okay, this is just to clarify what is allowed now, and even after the solar overlay district, if that does indeed pass in town meeting. All zoning districts allow roof-mounted solar panels, residential and commercial buildings. All zoning districts allow solar built up over parking lots and solar as any accessory to the primary use of the lot. So none of the things that we're talking about today with the commercial solar bylaw and adding an overlay district has any effect on any of these uses. Next page. Okay, criteria for inclusion. We discussed this on Thursday. Criteria for inclusion. The initial parcels that Zach placed on the map, and this was for planning board and public forum discussion. Anything that has an existing commercial solar installation, or it has been approved but not yet built, or there's been an application for a solar installation on a parcel. In addition, any parcels with one or more of the following: a minimal wooded area, so kind of brown space rather than green space, I guess it's called. Distance from residential neighborhoods, and that was a subjective rather than objective criteria. And ample space is available on the lot for visual screening and maintenance of noise screening, and or unsuitable for other development. So the next page. This is the proposal for some of the parcels under consideration by the planning board. We have not yet decided as a planning board that these are the final parcels that are going forward to town meeting for a town meeting vote. But that is part of the discussion today to get input, and then Muriel will have us decide on the final parcels to put in there. So the 495 corridor that is kind of circled in green is state-owned land. There's a parcel in the upper left corner that is town-owned land on Fruit Street. And then there's some existing or under review solar farms. And besides that, a number of parcels have been requested to be added by certain owners of parcels in the town. Next. We'll come back to that map. Okay, this is the wording used by Weston, and I just have highlighted. They have highlighted in bold down here. They have identified only one parcel in their town to be used for solar. It was a capped landfill, and no other commercial installations have been put into town. The next page. By the way, this presentation is available to everyone on the town website under the admin files. Okay, so in Wellesley, they identified the clover leaf at the intersection of routes 9 and 128 as a parcel available for solar, commercial solar farm. And that is the only parcel in Wellesley that was identified for that. Next page. Yeah, I'm going to skip over that one. Go to the next page. It's additional information if people want it. And then the town council letter just clarified that, Massachusetts general law regarding these solar is that towns may not prohibit or unreasonably regulate the installation of solar energy systems or building with structures that facilitate the collection of solar energy, except where necessary to protect the public health, safety, or welfare. So if we are challenged in court, the town needs to be able to offer a justification. And they go on to say, town council does in the next paragraph, that even though it is unlikely to be restricted, or I should say, unlikely to the amendment is unlikely to be rejected by the Attorney General's office, it still cannot be applied if it contravenes the Massachusetts general law in the paragraph above. So we just have to be aware of that. However, one of the reasons we used the wording the way we did in the bylaw was because of Weston and Wellesley, and they have been successful and have not been challenged in court for their wording. And so we utilized that same type of wording in order to create a bylaw that was unlikely to be challenged. I think, is there one more slide? Okay, so these are potential future considerations that have been brought up Thursday as well as previously. So there's a Falmouth bylaw providing specific examples of setbacks and deforestation limits. I've not had a chance to look at it, but it may be more extensive than the Hopkinton setbacks that are already in place. Right now, commercial solar voltaic has to comply with setbacks that are applicable for whatever zone they are being placed in. And there's also been a suggestion to instead of using an overlay district, simply limiting commercial solar installations to the industrial or business districts already on the Hopkinton zoning map. Is that it? Is that all the slides? I think that's it.
Yes, that's it.
So you could go back to the overlay map possibly, but I'll let Muriel take it from here in terms of what she wants to show or discuss.
Okay. So yeah, we'll leave the overlay map there. And I think that I'm gonna put everybody's faces over it. All right. So I'm quite sure everybody's aware. Hi, Rob, nice to see you. That there's an awful lot of interest. I'm having a hard time I'm covering up the zoning map, trying to bring everybody into focus here. So I think that that we need to, Mary, first of all, I should say, thank you very much for that. I think that helped a lot. And I think that we can build on that for town meeting when we are able to go to town meeting. There has been, I just want to clarify, there has been what has been advertised for this meeting are additions of properties off of, actually what I saw on the list was off of Teresa Road, but I think what people had said that they were off of like Nancy Lane or something like that. 66 Fruit Street, we had talked about adding, and then 2 parcels, I believe, off of Wood Street that the Nations had asked about adding. We have since heard from, I believe it's an attorney.
Muriel?
What's that?
Through the chair, sorry.
Yeah.
A question about process.
Yeah,
So-
hold on one second. I just want to
Okay,
finish
sure.
my
Go ahead.
statement,
Yep,
but
go
I
ahead.
appreciate
Sorry.
that, Dave. We have since heard from two people, I think, that want to add properties, Tom Terry and Amy Peterson, I believe, on behalf of an owner at 36 Front Street. I just wanted to put that in front of people, but what we are talking about tonight is the original overlay and also the proposed additions of Fruit Street. The 2 or 3 parcels, is it 3 parcels off of Teresa Road, or is it 2? I'm sorry.
It's 2 parcels off of Teresa Road, and it's 3 parcels off of Wood Street.
Oh, there you go. I'm confused. Okay. So Dave, yeah, I'm happy to hear process. I think we need to talk about process first. I just kind of wanted to clarify for the audience
Yep.
what's in front of us and that we have heard about additional requests. We also have gotten a couple requests to take parcels off. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody requested that we take off the parcel off of Franklin Road that's was the Liberty Mutual property, and somebody also inquired about the East Main Street property that currently has a commercial solar installation, but removing the parts of the parcel that don't have the installation. Just to clarify what we've heard about adding and subtracting. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, great. Thank you, Muriel. So yeah, before we started talking about all the properties, I wanted to just high level come up
Yeah.
with an approach and see how everybody feels about this. But we have option 1, which is in front of us. Thank you. Once again, thank you, Mary, very much for her hard work.
Option 1 is the original overlay.
Correct. And then she showed in option 2 and 3, what I'm calling 2 and 3, which would not have anything to do with individual properties as far as adding or removing. Correct?
Explain that.
Can we pull up the options, the 2 and 3? While they're being pulled up, we wouldn't have this discussion about which properties to add, which properties to remove. That's only for option 1. It's my interpretation.
So we may be talking in
Yeah,
circles. So I want to
Mary
just
had a
be
page at
really,
the Mary had a
really
page
careful that we're
there was
clear.
A couple options discussed. One was the business zoning.
Oh, at the end of the presentation.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So what I'd like to do is bring up that page, and I'd like to add one more option, an option 4 per se.
Mhm.
And what I would like that to say is that we modify option 1 to only include approved parcels. And in effect, it would be a moratorium until we can have some time to think about it for a year and figure this out instead of trying to rush through it.
So I think I understand what you're saying. So you are recommending, for example, the original overlay district and removing the parcel off Franklin that does not yet have an approved installation?
That's a gray area. I think I would be okay with that because they've submitted the paperwork.
Okay, so you
I
know
mean,
what?
that would be the gray area, right?
Yeah, so I really want to have this conversation about process, and I appreciate this, so I'm not actually pushing back, but I want to make sure that
Yep.
when we decide it, it's really crystal clear.
Yes.
So we're gonna talk about the original proposed overlay district as it was proposed.
Okay.
We will have to also talk about the parcels that we advertise that we would talk about potentially adding. We will also have to talk about the requests from people who want to add parcels or subtract parcels, right?
Correct.
I also want to make sure that we include in the conversation the fact that we know that some citizens have talked about a citizens petition special town meeting to have a moratorium, a straight moratorium.
Can we
which
just
don't
put
know
those
if
up
that'll
on,
happen.
can we just put those up on that one page? Are we allowed to update that so we can have option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4? Because it sounds like I'm hearing 5 options right now.
They're not really options. I think we have to walk through it one
Okay,
at a
but
time.
But
But
what I'm
Dave,
afraid, what I'm
It's not
afraid is,
possible to make those changes.
okay, so or any Word document, we could just type them up real quickly.
Yeah.
But the proposal that I'm calling well, first of all, option 3, which I proposed the other night, it sounded like that could not be done with it for this town meeting.
What is option 3 that you
Was
mentioned the other night, Dave?
business and office space only?
Oh, okay.
We would
Option-
have to,
I'm
we'd have to
keeping,
notice those property owners, I think.
we would anything we do differently as far as adding properties, Amy's correct. We would have to have a whole new public hearing and advertise it, right? We can't add it without advertising anything, right?
So we can't change. So I was thinking that does that mean whenever we talk about agricultural districts in any of our meetings, we have to notify all the abutters? I'm just wondering.
If we are proposing a change to zoning, we have to notify the abutters of the property.
So, Madam
Yes.
Chair, if I may clarify,
Yeah,
if you change the zoning map, you need to notify parcels that are affected by that zoning change. So since it's not necessarily the zoning map, but it would be considered a zoning map since it's referenced in the language of the bylaw, this would be considered a zoning map, and therefore any parcels that would change after this is accepted would need to get notified, or even now. So if we were to take off all the parcels that are currently on this proposed map that's on the screen and only put industrial A, industrial B districts, all the parcels that haven't been notified, which I think is everything but the Harvey's transfer station, would then have to be re-notified or notified initially to let them know that their parcels are being changed on the zoning map. If you're changing an aspect of agricultural district, that doesn't mean all agricultural district parcels need to be changed. If you're removing a parcel or adding a parcel to the agricultural district, then that parcel would need to be notified. Is that
But
clarify?
through the chair, if I understand that correctly,
see you,
then
Jane, but go ahead, Dave.
what I'm considering option 3 could be on the town meeting without notifying.
No,
I thought
no,
that
I
was
can,
different.
I can almost guarantee you, the town moderator would rule that out, outside the four corners, because it's a big expansion. So I don't think that that's possible, is what I'm saying. And I think rightly so. I just don't think that it gives people an opportunity to contemplate it with enough advance notice. But
Can
John, I
just
don't know
get-
what you think.
Yeah, could I just get confirmation through the chair from John?
Yes.
Because I
Yeah.
kind of heard him say that I thought it would be okay, but maybe I
Yes.
misunderstood.
So if you're changing this map, any parcels that change would need to be notified. If
But
you
if they
take them
were-
off, they don't need to be notified. If you add them to the map, they would need to be notified. The process that goes with that is you would need to have notice in the newspaper 2 consecutive weeks, and then they would have to get a letter, and then abutters to those properties would also have to be noticed. So depending on the timing, if the town meeting is still the 22nd and this doesn't go out for another 3 weeks, that may not allow for that to happen because then there wouldn't be enough time to notice, have a hearing, and meet all the criteria. But this map that's on the screen can still change. Parcels can be removed or added. It would just need to get noticed. And as long as the timing is correct and follows the law, then it can change.
Through the chair, could I add?
Hold on, Amy, 1 second.
Yep.
Jane had raised her hand ahead of time, which I don't know if anybody could know but me. Jane?
I'm just a little confused about the timing of who gets to approve this map when, through the chair, question to John, is when you said when this map gets approved, is that approved by the planning board? And if so, if when, or if not, is it approved by town meeting? I'm just a little foggy on when you said
So-
that map is approved.
Yeah, so the planning board would essentially approve it, and it's not necessarily an official approval. They would approve it, and then it would get recorded at the town clerk, and then the map would officially get approved at town meeting with the zoning changes that are currently before the board right now. So
Okay.
if that is accepted, that accepts the map as well.
So,
So we don't actually
it
have
hasn't happened. It hasn't happened yet, right?
No,
What hasn't
and we
happened yet?
can't, I mean, we are gonna recommend a map. I think we should use approval for town meeting purposes, just for clarity.
Okay.
The planning board gets the opportunity to put forward an overlay recommendation if we choose to. But the ultimate authority for the zoning change is always town meeting voters.
Thank you.
So, sorry, Muriel, just through the chair, just to kind of summarize, because I'm sorry I started this whole conversation. Not sorry that I did, but it's a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
So I think my final answer would be, my suggestion would be to present this map, but only the properties that exist today, that have been approved today. So there would be no additions, there would only be removals, and I think that would be acceptable. for this
Okay,
type of map.
so I'm just restating it and make
Yeah.
sure you're right. What your recommendation by process is that we consider the original proposed overlay district without adding additional properties at this time to recommend for town meeting.
No, that's not true.
Okay,
I'm sorry, maybe I stated it wrong. What I'm suggesting is we propose this overlay district, but the overlay district only include the properties that have already been approved. So there's no subjectiveness. I mean,
there's,
Approved to have solar installed, I think he means.
correct.
oh, thank you,
Sorry.
Amy. Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, I'm sorry. I was not understanding you, Dave. All right, so that does change the original proposed overlay district, right? So if
Correct.
you would look at that while we hear from other people and specifically state when the time is right, which parcels you would take off. I think if
So-
I don't have it in front of me, I have a faces in front of me.
So sorry, I don't want to do that because that's adding subjectiveness. I want it to be objective and have a guideline that the only way it can be on this map, and may perhaps have John match it up with those that have been approved. I mean,
I think
'cause
there's only one that's pending. Is that right, John?
no, but I mean, like all the 495 will be removed, correct?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
'Cause that's subjective, right?
And
Yep.
the Harvey is not.
All right. No, there's, I think that Mary did a really lovely job outlining the process and the criteria that we went through. But you're entitled to make your recommendation, Dave. That's so, I will keep that thought.
Okay. I think everybody's clear though what the ask is, right? with my
Yeah, I
proposal.
am finally clear. I'm sorry, I was a little slow on the uptake. Amy,
Can you
you
just-
had something you wanted to ask?
No, I'm all set now.
I was just gonna ask Muriel if you could check with the other planning board members to see if they're clear. And we don't need to propose it right now, but maybe down the later on.
No,
tonight.
right. Yep. I'm just trying to understand what you were saying. I appreciate that.
Me too. I'm trying to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm still Dave, through the chair.
Yes, Deb.
I'm still, could Dave restate that again? I just want,
Let me say it so that I'm sure I got it, Dave, okay?
Okay,
So he is proposing that the overlay district that we take forward to town meeting only have on it the parcels that today have approved commercial solar photovoltaic installations on the parcels. Dave is nodding, right? So that would necessarily mean that the 495 zone would go away. And the suggestion for industrial where Harvey's now is, it would go away. And the only parcels that would remain would be the ones that already have existing permitted facilities that can go there. They may not exist yet, but they are permitted. Does that
That's fair.
clarify
Thanks,
it for you,
Lloyd.
Deb?
yeah, and the
Yeah.
only gray area would be Liberty Mutual because
Thank you very
perhaps
much.
that would be approved by town meeting, so we could discuss that separately.
Okay, well, I at least understand what you mean. So I just want, so when I was thinking process, that seems more like a recommendation for me, but that's fine. When I'm thinking process, I just want, hey Frank, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I want to make sure that the planning board is really clear on the process as we go forward, but most importantly, I want to make sure that the public is really clear about what the process is going forward. And then we will ultimately have a decision, and I want to make sure that the public is really clear on what the decision is when we go forward as well.
So through the chair, Muriel, just to tie this back to process again,
Mhm.
I think we should list out the options and choose an option because say, for instance, my option was chosen, there would be no need to discuss individual properties, and it could save a lot of time, angst. So I think there's options out there, and I think
Yep.
we should go
Yep,
on an
I
option.
see what you're saying. I wanted to say one thing to the public too, before we go forward, just as clarifying, Mary did a great job. But I wanted to make sure, I think that sometimes the public thinks, and you stated this, but thinks that we have more authority than we do. And really, we, as long as it meets the criteria, and part of that is that it shall not be detrimental to the town or to the neighborhoods. And I think that what a lot of people might not understand is how subjective that ends up being when we are faced with special permit requests and proposals. And the subjectivity of it keeps us from being able to, we can't decide that something is detrimental to a neighborhood unless we can prove it. We have to know it's detrimental. Everybody can have a different opinion on that. So I just wanted to make sure that the public really understands that we have a certain set of guidelines that we can utilize, and we can't just decide that we don't want to see a solar installation, as an example, in a particular spot, even if it's dropped right into a neighborhood, because at the moment it's allowed anywhere. And as long as it doesn't impede the public's safety, we really are bound to consider approving it or go to court over it, which is not an attractive option either. All right.
Madam Chair, Amy has raised her hand.
Yes, Amy, thank you.
I just wanted to add, I appreciate Dave's comments, but I think before we go down to narrow it down to the options, I think we should hear from the public and then decide on a few options, because I think the public's here to
Yeah,
speak.
they definitely are, Amy, and we definitely have to listen to the public for sure. What I'm trying to make sure is that when we're talking about options, it's really clear every time what we mean by those options. I wanted, I kind of listed out just at least what I know we have to do is we have to decide whether or not we will or won't add parcels for this annual town meeting to the original proposed map. And I feel like that is for me, I feel like that's a clearer process. And then we'd also need to decide whether or not we will or won't subtract parcels from the original proposed solar overlay district. And then most importantly, we need to have a process as part of this conversation where changes to whatever we decide will take place or can take place. And Mary explained that briefly in the presentation, so that if we propose a solar overlay district that limits where commercial solar can go in Hopkinton, and it passes by a 2/3 vote at a town meeting, that will be where commercial solar can go, unless somebody approaches the planning board through the ZAC process to add a parcel or parcels to that overlay district, to then take to town meeting to get a change to the zoning map, and then possibly put solar on that. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear, that we clearly delineate a process for the public going forward as well. All right. Do any members of the planning board want to weigh in on obviously any piece of this conversation, but most specifically using the original planned solar overlay district as the baseline, whether we would like to, whether you want to consider adding or subtracting parcels for this town meeting? Frank?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Excellent, thank you. I think since the board has already asked about additional parcels, we've had people talk about additional parcels that they should be included. I don't know about if you guys, but I've heard from people that are like, if this process is going on, I want to be included. So they're making the effort to be included. I think they should their parcels should be included in the process.
Okay. Anybody, Jane?
Yeah, so I think we've already opened up the conversation to have people weigh in on the process, and they've already requested their parcels to be put into a map, whether it's this original map or a secondary map or whatever it is. I don't know where we would end up if suddenly we threw them off the bus or threw them off the boat or whatever you want to say.
Off the island.
Yeah. Yeah, you're off the island. So I don't know where we would be on that, and as far as legal terms going down the road, as far as a planning board goes, because these people have come forward and asked to be included and recognized to be included in this map, and now could possibly say, no, you don't fit that criteria. Secondly, and this may not, let me know, Muriel, if this is not part of what you're looking for, but I just want to throw this out there. Where do we leave these property owners if we tell them that they cannot use their property for solar farms and they have this parcel of land? Where are we left as a town if they just decide to go in there and clear cut their land or use it for other purposes? It's such a complicated conversation to have. One process, we're trying to preserve our our environment and protect our scenic view so that neighbors don't have to look at these solar farms. But I'm just wondering if there's not more research we could do to protect our environment, and also as a planning board, do more research so that we could do some more proactive steps for screening. Some things that we haven't looked at yet so far, different screening properties to help find a middle road, to find some mitigation. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, Jane, thank you. Rob is next.
All right, so just my comments. The reason this is even being discussed, I think it was said by Mary Larson, Marlowe, to start off.
Sorry.
The planning board has very little control. I would say we have no control to prevent solar farms today for any property that meets the minimum acreage, which is 3 acres. So any acreage, we have no control. So in the past year, we've had, I believe, 5 solar farm projects just presented before us, which involves some level of clear cutting of forest. And we haven't been able to stop them, and they could abut developments and usually do. And the vast majority of abutters get very upset. They don't want a solar farm in their backyard. They don't know what health risks it might be from having basically a mini power plant in their backyard. They don't know what long-term effects that could have. They don't visually like it. They don't like the way it looks. So there's that aspect. So what we're trying to do here is put some control in place. And since we've started this process of trying to put some control in place, now you can see the problem as it spirals. We've got 10 additional landowners that own parcels that want their property included in this solar overlay district. So without doing something, this is going to be a problem that gets worse, where there's going to be solar farms popping up in people's backyards all across town. So that's a big concern for the whole town, and not the whole town is not on this call, so it's not very representative. You got a lot of people that have particular financial vested interests on this call, and not the people that vote or will attend town meeting. When you factor that in with the vast majority of town, solar can be used as an accessory use. So clear cutting a forest to put in a solar farm is one thing, but any public building, anybody's own property, a solar could be put there because it's considered an accessory use. So I don't know that everyone clearly understands this. This is a big, important thing. Like a building, Dell EMC building, they could have solar on the roof. They don't need to go through this process. That's an accessory use. My house or anyone's house here, they could put solar there. So accessory use, not this. And I think just to sum it all up, my stance is you put it this way, Muriel, would I be in favor of adding any properties or potentially taking away? Definitely not in favor of adding any properties. It's as blunt as I can be.
Thanks, Rob. Gary.
Yeah, so first I just want to thank Mary again for the presentation, because I think that was nicely done and really helpful. And I do, and just to go back to even Rob's comment, I think I just want to make sure people are clear that this is really about supporting solar for where we think it belongs best. And I realize that we're not all going to agree on what that is. I don't think we're going to agree as a planning board. I don't think we're going to agree as the public. There's a lot of different perspectives on there. But what I do think is reasonable is that I think that regardless of how we decide to move forward, we need to make sure, to Muriel's point, that there is a well-defined process so that we can continue to review and evaluate and add parcels if that makes sense. Now that being said, to Rob's point, this is so we sort of see the spiral with a lot of properties and considerations and adding and removing. My take on it is at some point we have to draw a line in the sand. We have to make some decisions on how we move forward. And my recommendation would be that my preference would be to do it tonight. We've got good participation. We've got a lot of people involved. We go through those properties one by one. The property owner or representative can make their case as to why they think that it belongs in this solar overlay district. We take a straw vote among the planning board as to whether or not we include it, and then we move forward. And I think at some point we have to draw the line in the sand. We have to say, okay, this is what we're going to consider. If your property is not recommended to move forward, then there's a process for you to consider that at a later point in time. But those are my thoughts on how we might be able to move forward here.
Okay. I want to make sure I say a couple of things. I appreciate everybody's contribution. I'm not saying that we can't do that, Gary, but I just want to make that we can't speak to each property. We can only speak to the properties that were advertised for this public hearing. I just want to make sure that that's clear to everybody and the public. So part and parcel of the conversation, sorry for the pun, has to be that we are going to at some point cut off entertaining additions to this particular overlay question for this town meeting. Because if we entertain additional parcels, we have to then renotice the public and have another public hearing. So that's part of the discussion we have to have tonight. I also wanted to make the point that our process did not necessarily invite these additions. These additions came forward at our public hearing for the solar overlay district as proposed by Zach. And the Zach process was ongoing for the previous many months. These properties that we're talking about did not come forward into that process. So for me, that's a consideration as well, because they certainly were able to do that. And any zoning change typically does go through the ZAC process. That's why we have it there. The other complicating thing that I want to personally add to this conversation, and maybe especially to Dave, is that I don't necessarily, this is me personally, right? So zoning is all about what is allowed for property uses for property to be used for. So for example, Jane asked the question, what does it mean to property owners? Their properties can be used for anything that's allowed by zoning, right? And we don't have anything that's allowed by right. We don't have anything to say about. People can clear cut their properties if they want to, as long as it's not on a scenic road in the town's right of way, as Mary pointed out in her presentation. So this isn't really about deciding all the things that people can or can't do. That's defined by law. This is about where we want zoning to be allowed, and it will necessarily, if it goes through and it is an overlay district, it will necessarily say, right, if the voters accept it by a 2/3 vote, it will necessarily say that there are some properties in town where solar cannot go. And that's the purpose of zoning, is to decide where you want things and where you don't want uses, right? So that is what we're deciding with something like this overlay map. What I wanted to say, Dave, was, for example, your proposal to include the properties like Liberty Mutual potentially, or Wilson Street, where they have been permitted. In the grand discussion of zoning, we could decide, if those are not parcels where we would have chosen, where we think it's the right thing for solar, we can decide to leave them off of a solar overlay map. And that would not change any part of the permit holder's right to put up solar, but it would mean if that didn't go forward in the future, somebody else couldn't come in and put solar there. So there's all kinds of implications. It isn't necessarily true for me that the places where solar has been permitted are the places that it would be most attractive to make sure they're included in the map either. I don't know if I'm confusing everybody. Any other members of the planning board want to, Rob, I saw your hand. Rob?
He's on mute.
Muriel, does that mean even if a property that has for example, even if a property has an existing solar array today,
Yeah,
we don't need to include it on the map? That solar array is still going to exist.
that's right. That's right. And just for example, if there's a permitted property that doesn't have a solar array, it doesn't change that permit holder's ability to put up a solar array. But it would change the ability of somebody in the future of doing that.
If the property changes hands,
Yes.
Future owner couldn't build one if it hasn't been developed, and a future owner couldn't add on. Well, they'd have to add on to it. They'd have to come before the board.
I'm just saying that permit stands,
Okay.
but it doesn't. But another permit would not necessarily, right? I'm just saying that the whole conversation is complex.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else on the planning board? And I'm going to open it up to the public to weigh in. Yes, Mary.
Hi, yes. What you had just raised, Muriel, about the approved parcels and the parcels under consideration for solar currently. These were placed on the initial proposed solar overlay map because they already had solar. But I'm personally in favor of removing the ones that that we do not feel are appropriate for solar. So in case those projects fall through, they would not be approved for solar. Personally, I would think the Liberty Mutual property not be included, and even the Wood Street property that we just approved a few months ago, and it hasn't been built yet. On the off chance that it does not move forward, I would not be opposed to saying that is not an approved property for solar.
Can I ask you how you feel about Wilson?
Wilson. I'm trying to
Between, between Wilson and Cedar.
between Wilson and, oh, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. I'm thinking, yeah.
Not Wood
Actually,
Street.
when I said Wood Street, I meant that one.
Yeah.
The Wood
right.
Street one is still, we're still, did we just approve that? Yeah, that one as well. But that one is not as bad as, I think the Wilson and Cedar Street one, I would definitely not include on the overlay.
All right. I saw Gary's hand go up again, but did anybody who hasn't spoken yet want to speak? Deb?
Yeah, I think they're all really great ideas. I think that one thing we need is clarification. And what I'd like to clarify are what our rules or what our guidelines are before we look at everyone's
Right.
pieces of parcels that they want. We need to step back a little bit and look to see what do we want to define? What kind of setback are we looking at? What kind of brown or gray earth are we looking for to be the ideal location? And before, so that we can set the criteria for a realistic expectation, so that all these people who do want to have their properties included have a pretty good grasp going into the next meeting whether their property is ideal or not. But I think so we should have those criteria published.
So I think that I'm gonna reach out to John again here, and I think that we're gonna the same hurdle applies. I don't think that we can add language at this point because it's been published, right? That would be a question in my mind. That is a question for next year, Zach, to continue to take up for proposal to the next town meeting. But John.
We cannot add language to the article.
Gary, I saw your hand.
Yeah, just from a process perspective, I think personally, I think we're better off going through these one property at a time than having each person discuss all of them, because I think it just gets mixed. And I know this is, I agree with you that we should only be discussing the ones of which we've noticed. That's where I draw my line in the sand. But I think this is also our fourth public hearing of which we've at least talked about it. And I really think we need to start pushing towards literally a go no go on each property as to what we include and what we don't. So
can I ask you, is it reasonable at this point to ask for a motion to not add any properties that would have to be re-noticed and have another public hearing, or is it too soon for that?
I personally, I'm not sure that's a motion. I guess it could be.
So, or a decision, right?
I mean, or an agreement of some kind.
An agreement. I just think that, I don't know.
Draw the line in
I
the
think
sand.
that if at some point we do have to draw a line in the sand to even what we will consider for this year.
I agree. I'm 100% supportive of that. I think it's time for us to move forward and start talking about these properties and make some recommendations as to how we move forward.
Mary.
I would agree with Gary. There needs to just be, we could debate this endlessly. We could have the criteria debated endlessly. And depending on the day and the public comment we get, it could swing one way or the other. So we just need to make a decision. We need to let town meeting make a decision, and then we go from there.
All right. I see Jane's hand as well. Yes. Jane?
I agree with Deb. I think we need a clear set of criteria about what could define an agreeable commercial solar farm as far as setbacks and other criteria that we're looking for. Right now, it seems very confusing. It seems rather, this one was there and that one was there. Well, maybe we'll throw that one out, or maybe we'll throw that out. But I think Deborah had some really good suggestions about defining where we're going to go. I think it's too soon. I think we're rushing it.
Can I,
And
So, hold on. So, nothing about this process, I'm going to push back on that, has been rushed. It feels a little cumbersome because we've had so many additions at the end, and I congratulate this entire board for being really flexible and open in a complicated way to welcoming residents who stepped forward at the public hearing that we first held, and trying to find a way forward during a complicated time. So there's one thing, I am not ignoring anybody's, Dave, I'm not ignoring your process point. I'm not ignoring anybody else's process point, but for the purposes of this meeting, for me to try and control the conversation so everybody in it knows what they're talking to, the baseline map will be the original proposed solar overlay district that went forward, right? So that's where we're gonna speak to as the foundational overlay map. And then we will entertain conversation, discussion, and consider changes to the original proposed overlay map one at a time. Does that make sense? I see a couple heads and a thumb. Okay.
I agree.
All right. So we are talking about John, are you able to put up the original proposed solar overlay district map? All right. And this is where it gets fun. We're going to ask the public to participate. And John, I can't see when everybody has raised their hand or is wanting to speak. So John is controlling, letting me know when people are asking to speak.
So, Madam Chair, Dave and Amy had also raised their hands.
I'm
previously.
sorry.
Looks like Dave
Okay.
lowered his hand.
Thank you.
Well, I did
Dave?
lower my hand because I do agree with you guys. I want to get going on this, but I had a question about the sequence. Are we going to talk about the existing properties first on the map or possible additions? What's the
So
order?
we're gonna, from the public, we're talking about additions. So we're talking about the overlay map that was proposed. And the public, we're gonna take the public's comments about additions and or I suppose subtractions, because we did get some requests for that discussion too.
So through the chair, we'll take them in the order of the audience.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, just so Dave, so that we all have in front of us the map we're starting with, if that's okay with you.
Yep, great.
It just feels to me like that's a more transparent process. People can see better. Okay, Amy.
This may be unnecessary at this point, but I just feel like we've been talking in circles and the public has been here for 2 or 3 meetings. And I think we kind of know where each of us sort of roughly stand. And I think we really need to let the public speak and then we'll come back as a planning board after. But maybe, I think we're almost there anyway. So.
Okay, thanks. All right, is there any member of the public who would like to speak?
So, Madam Chair, Dale's iPad had
Okay.
raised their hand a while ago. So I'm
Okay,
unmute
Dale,
them now.
Dale, you're up first.
Dale Danahy, 25 East Main Street. Can you
Hi, Dale.
hear me?
I
Oh,
can.
awesome. Well, I'll tell you, this is a public hearing, but let me tell you, this is the most frustrating thing I've ever had to do. So this is the 3rd meeting I've tried to weigh in on, and it's the first one I've finally been successful. So I know there are a lot of people out there that would love to be part of this public hearing, but cannot because, like me, they are technologically challenged. So last Thursday, when I thought I was watching the whole thing, I raised my hand, and lo and behold, everybody said, go to the bottom of your screen. Hey, mine's at the top of the screen. So I never found the raise my hand part, but I stood there waving, for 5 minutes and being ignored and being totally frustrated. So I applaud that you guys are trying to do this, but this is not a public meeting that people can weigh in on because I know a lot of people that want to be part of this and aren't able to do it. So totally
I do
frustrated.
appreciate that, Dale, a lot, and we do hear it. Okay.
I mean, I don't go on the town's website. I don't get my information from the internet. I read a newspaper, and none of this has ever been in the Hopkinton Independent, the Middlesex News. So again, how do you participate if you don't know what's going on? And not everybody goes to the website or goes to, the internet for their information. So I think you're excluding people that want to be part of this process that have been hearing about it, but in the last month, you've got COVID-19 that has shut down, your ability to participate. So I would love to see this postponed till next year. I know you guys have worked hard on it, but the process is not democratic the way you're doing it. Just my opinion. I'm
Okay,
glad I'm
so
being
noted.
included. I hope to be included. But it is the most frustrating process I've ever been through.
Okay, do you want to say something about the overlay map other than process?
I hope to be included. My property abuts another solar farm. That's why I feel it's appropriate. So when you are going parcel by parcel, my property's off of Nancy Lane. It's one of the two parcels in conjunction with the Churco property.
Okay, thank you.
I'm totally confused though as to what you guys are doing right now. When you sit in a public meeting, you've got somebody beside you, so when you miss something, you can jab your elbow and say, "What did they just say?" I'm sitting
So
here
let
in my
me-
living room with my dog by myself, saying, "Shit, what did I just miss?" Oh, excuse me,
Oh,
sorry.
language.
Oops,
Ooh.
I know.
This
I'm
is,
sorry.
this is a
I'm
family
sorry.
meeting, Dale.
I
Good
know.
heavens.
I hope other
Okay.
people can weigh in.
I'm gonna keep stating it because it is challenging. We are commenting, we are addressing all of our comments to the original proposed overlay district map. So I understand that you are advocating for your parcel off Nancy Lane to be added to that overlay map.
Correct. Now, at the last meeting on Thursday, when did the conversation get postponed to the 10 o'clock part of the meeting? I didn't even hear that. You guys started talking about it, you stopped discussing it. So I unplugged and then I find out that it was continued to 10 o'clock at night last Thursday. When was that part of the discussion that you were going to do that?
So it was on the agenda for last Thursday. It was fair game to discuss at any time. It was the item that we discussed at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Again, I don't go to the internet to get my information, and I guess I've got to learn how to do that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
Dana Hall has raised.
Hi, Dana.
Unmute him.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dana.
Okay, I want to make sure I didn't mute myself. So I have a prepared statement, so hopefully I can get into my 3-minute time limit. I just want to say, Dana Hall, 62 Teresa Road. I'm in favor of the original solar overlay district map generated by the ZAC. I believe that's referred to as the January 2020 map. I am currently opposed to the amended map. I believe that's dated 3/20. The reason is I believe there's been insufficient time and effort has been available for really understanding the sites that have been want to be added and reviewed appropriately. Zach was originally tasked with coming up with this map, and it's comprised of many stakeholders, multiple town committees, the Chamber of Commerce, and at-large members. But Zach has not been involved at all in the creation of the amended map. So it would be my point, if the map is to be amended, I think it would be reasonable to get input from Zach as they created the original map, and they do represent a diverse swath of expertise and opinion across the town. My second point would be, therefore, I'm in favor of creating a process whereby additional parcels can be added and be vetted against a set of specific guidelines which are more detailed and rigorous than the current set, as the current set seems to be very general and vague and open to wide interpretation. These guidelines could be created with input from all stakeholders, including the ZAC committee. For example, there is precedent for having very specific site constraints. The town of Falmouth passed in November 2018 a solar overlay district, which did impose such requirements on site selection. Amongst these, and there was a bunch, but the ones I have highlighted in major are a minimum site size of 7 acres, which would mean you don't get, solar farms of 2 acres or 3 acres here dotted all over the place. It's a real large commercial overlay. In their overlay district, they specifically put in buffer and setback requirements relative to roads and abutting properties. And they also included a provision to protect forest land, that there would be no maximum deforestation of more than 2 acres. And that's the language that's in their overlay district and got passed by town meeting. Our current overlay bylaw has no real rigid or specific site guidelines or requirements.
Yes, it does.
I'm
It
sorry,
does.
excuse me. We're not gonna have back and forth that way.
Okay. Well, I didn't see any, but so I would propose, and in conclusion, I would propose that the planning board, with input from Zach and the other stakeholders in the process, which would include the landowners and the abutters, come up with a process where specific sites can be reviewed, debated, researched, and then appropriately be added or rejected based upon solid criteria rather than touchy-feely. Even, and it's in my backyard. I'm not. I mean, I'm not trying to do the NIMBY approach. I'm saying it needs to be much more thorough, and rather than just, oh, let's add this, add that, and like you said, in the last recent couple of weeks, you've got an additional 10 or so properties that want to be added, and there's no specific either process or guideline to say yes or no. And I'll finish with that. So I'm in favor of the original map, so that we do get something on the books to protect the town from just solar being developed anywhere, and then a more thorough process to add properties as such.
Great, Dana, thank you. John, do we have anybody waiting?
Yep, we have Andrew. So I'll just tell you who's raised their hand so far. Andrew
Yep.
Lindeman, Michael's iPad, and Bill Marr. And it looks like Mr. Ober is also raising his hand.
Okay, I'll start
physically.
with Andrew Lindeman.
I'm going to unmute him.
Yep.
Okay, unmute.
Hello, Andrew Lindeman, 21 Phipps Street.
Welcome.
I'm the one who emailed about possible subtraction idea.
Thank you.
Let's see. I worry that this overlay, new overlay idea would put pressure on the existing parcels in town that have solar, but are not already completely full of solar. So again, that would be, I don't know about all the solar farms, but that definitely applies to the East Main Street land. It's a guess, but I suspect that less than a third of the land currently has solar panels on it. It's in a very visible part of town, and yes, it does. I abut from the back of it currently, or I abut to the back of it. But to have solar panels all up and down East Main Street would not be a very welcoming vision for people coming in and out of our town. So you know, I think it was a back and forth with Rob Benson earlier. The thought of, can we subtract a parcel even if it already has panels on it? I think that was answered that yes, it could be, and so I'm a proponent of that idea.
And you are proposing to remove the East Main Street parcel?
I would like to see that, yes. I assume somebody who's not a board member can't propose anything, but yeah.
No, this is a public hearing, sir.
Okay.
So you are welcome to suggest or ask anything and have your wishes known. So
I see. Okay, so yeah, I suggest that, and that would be my wish. Again, you know, I think a third or maybe even just 25% of that land currently has panels. They're set back quite a ways from Route 135, and to envision those panels to come up further. I don't think the current owner would allow that to happen, but you know, for something to make it easy for a future owner to do that is a scary thought. And again, if there's very little land in town that allows solar, if this were to pass and there's very little land that allows solar farms, there might be financial pressure in the future to fill that land up with more panels.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. Okay, Michael's iPad.
Mike Sullivan, 59 Teresa Road. First, I'd like to thank Mary. That presentation clarified a number of things for me, so I very much appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the board. God bless you all. Knowing you go through some of this stuff. My question really is, when you're going through the process, I became convinced, not just now, but convinced that I favor an overlay. I'd like the planning board to be involved in future solar sightings. What confused me a bit is I'm assuming that 2013 Article 31 solar provisions would continue to apply here. But also, when Mary was doing her presentation, she used some of the ZAC criteria. And I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself, could there be more criteria? Could there be more objective stated basis for choosing the lots that go into this? Then the part that confused me is, at some point, John said there could be no new language added to the article. Does that mean that if we came up with some more bylaw criteria that would be used for citing or considering parcels, that it couldn't be done concurrently with this article?
So that's correct, Mr. Sullivan. So unless this is an odd year and we don't know how town meeting is going to play out, it is possible that it'll be there will
Delayed
be
till
a
the fall.
town meeting
Yeah.
just for the articles that will help keep the town running, and then other articles will be put forward to a special town meeting in the fall. If town meeting is held, as we hope it is going to be in June, and the current warrant stands, we cannot add language to that. Now, there is a process going forward where we could add more language to subsequent town meeting warrants for consideration by those voters. But we cannot change what has been noticed to the public in the warrant for this town meeting, unless something changes.
Okay, if I may, just one short last comment. I think, given the information that was provided about Wellesley and Weston, I kind of go in the camp of limiting the map that is adopted to be as limited as possible, if we can do that.
Can I
In other
ask you
words-
specifically, the very first overlay district as proposed is the one that you would support?
Correct, the one from the 6th, I think, of March, I believe it was.
I
Which
don't
is
have the
current-
dates in front of me.
Well, it's the current solar projects that are on there.
And 495.
I guess 495 would be in there, yeah.
Okay, and it also has Harvey's on there, the property that the Harvey's own now that's industrially zoned.
Yeah, my concern is simply this, is that without criteria being added, and whether it's the ZAC or you folks who were asked in the future, when somebody raises their hand and says, I want to put my parcel in there,
yeah,
it would be very comfortable to be looking at a checklist of things.
Yes.
For example,
I understand. Yep.
That's all. So thank you very much. Appreciate your
Yep.
work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Marr,
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
It's Bill Marr, 57 Teresa Road. I want to say that I support the concept of the solar overlay for commercial solar fields, as I don't think that it's in the best interest in the town to have unfettered continued development of solar fields wherever solar developers feel like putting them. I would say, after hearing Mr. Paul's comments, I would be in favor of approving the overlay of only the existing solar fields that are in place now, and not including any others, including 495. Not that I have any objections to 495, but at least to establish a moratorium until we come up with better criteria defining where those locations should be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Ober, or Ms. Ober, I'm sorry. I can't hear you. Hold on. Hello?
Hold on. Hold on.
Yep,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Hi, thank you
Oh.
for allowing us to participate tonight. I still want to go on the record with my same thing I said at the last meeting before the world got turned upside down, that the abutters of Franklin are against that Liberty Mutual being developed. So that was the same statement I made the last time. And after listening again tonight, I think a moratorium is in order, but due to the circumstances, we haven't been able to collect the signatures, obviously. And I guess my question is, if you put that, when you put that additional language in regarding the solar overlay, would the projects that are currently before the town meet that criteria? And I don't think it would. And our issue again is, if you have a permit and it's existing, fair enough. But where this project, Liberty Mutual site, is not already approved, we're very much against it.
So I just want to clarify the process for you, sir, that that the permit that is being considered now was put forward under the current zoning. So it is certainly still in play, and it would be in play no matter what, even if it's not, that process is not concluded, and we had a town meeting, and we put in an overlay district that didn't include the property, they would still be able to get their permit or be in the process for getting their permit under the zoning that was in place when they applied.
It's a grandfathered.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But my question is, if something were to go sideways on that project and they withdrew and walked away, what would happen then?
So you are in favor, if we use as the base. Oh, I'm sorry. So sorry. If we use as the baseline, the original proposed overlay district, which includes the 495 spine and the parcels that have solar or have permits underway. And I think the only other piece would be the industrial property that is Harvey's. It's not in front of me, but the original one. You would be in favor of removing the Franklin Road parcel?
Yes.
Okay. Understood.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, is there anybody else from the public? Stephanie.
Madam Chair, can I just get the last speaker's address, please? for the minute?
17 Fawn Ridge Road.
Thank you. I apologize. Yep.
So we have several speakers. Right now we have Sean Kimball, Beth Mona Hall, Rick Voss, Bubba and Nanny, which I think may be Tom Terry, Chris Nation, Tom, Donald King, Ron Nation.
All right, you're gonna have to shoot them to me one at a time.
They just went and
Yep.
added a lot. Okay, so Sean Kimball is next.
Sean Kimball. I don't hear Sean yet. Oh, I see Sean.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Sean Kimball, 64 Teresa Road. And I'll just keep my comments brief. I do want to thank the board for your time and your contributions. And Mary, I do appreciate the extra effort that you went in putting in the presentation over the weekend. Today's presentation obviously was a lot more clearer than last week, and I do personally appreciate that. I also have done a little bit of research with some assistance with some friends that the town of Athol is going through a very similar process. Actually, they're probably like 8 months ahead of us, and they hired Northeastern graduate students to do a proposal on the solar overlay district, and they came up with some proposed bylaws, and those proposed bylaws are referencing a whole bunch of other different towns. And I definitely encourage the board to kind of review that. It's lengthy, so you got to have some time, but unfortunately, but there's a lot of great material in that proposal that might help shed some light, use the pun, on what they're on what other towns are doing. On a personal note, I did notice, and the other thing is, I am in favor of a solar overlay district, specifically with the map proposed as of June 10th, 2020. I think it's named March 6th on the Google Drive, but it's dated, the map is dated January 10th. And so I'm in favor of that overlay map.
So you said June 1st, so it's
January 10th. I think it was the date of the map.
Mhm.
Oh,
The initial proposed overlay district.
Yeah, just so we're all, yeah, exactly. But in the presentation that Mary had put up, that was the March 20th map.
Yeah.
So just to clarify.
Okay.
And then and on a personal note, one of the properties, the one in particular right behind me, I think it was parcel R30 block 20 and R30 block 102. My particular property is actually really low, right? I'm actually on the base of the Charlesview Estates. And so right now in the springtime and in the fall, when it's hurricane season, I typically pump out, it could be up to 5 gallons a minute out of my basement. And the property to the west of me, which is R30 and R23, they're above me. And my concern is that any substantial lot clearing of a substantial amount of trees that would have otherwise be soaking up that stormwater would then go into the basin. And my concern is that the overall water level would rise. And then basically that basement mitigation problem I have, I'm not sure if I'd be able to mitigate it any further. And so I'm personally concerned about that particular property being added to the overlay map.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
oh.
Beth is next up.
Beth.
She's on.
Hi, this is Beth Cameron from 70 Teresa Road.
Hi, Beth.
First of all, thank you for the presentation tonight. It was very helpful in understanding the process so far. Similar to what other people said, I am in favor of the original overlay map that was from January. And I specifically agree with someone that commented a little bit earlier that should we move forward with an amendment to the map, there should be some more stringent and direct criteria associated with that, especially as it relates to deforestation, and particularly in my case, and I think actually in general to the residential neighborhoods that could be impacted no matter what property we're discussing. And I want to put on record, I'm definitely opposed to any solar developments behind the Teresa Charles Estates region. And I think everyone else has pretty much echoed my thoughts. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth.
Mona Hall is next.
Hi, Mona.
Hi. Okay, I am unmuted.
All right, my name is Mona Hall, and I'm from 62 Teresa Road, and I too want to thank you for those prepared slides because it did add to my knowledge base here. And I want to begin by saying that I too am in favor of that Zach approved original January map, and I want to specifically voice my opinion to the inclusion of the parcel behind Teresa Road or off Nancy Lane. Because it has an extensive wetland section. And it is well known to be an extensive wetland section by the Conservation Commission, and they know it to be a delicate wetland ecosystem. And as far as my understanding is that placement of ground mounted parcels are not allowed in the wetlands and in buffer zones. They're highly discouraged by the state, and if I understand the Hopkinton bylaws, they're not allowed according to the Hopkinton bylaws. Yeah, that's correct in wetlands.
So that would be the Concom's jurisdiction, but yes.
Yes, and also there's a pretty generous buffer zone around them. So that land is, I mean, anyone who walks it would easily be able to see that. Now, I've walked that land behind Therese Road every day for over 20 years when hiking was still allowed. Since then, no trespass has been gone up, and I've abided by that. But I want to give everyone on this committee a clear understanding of the parcel of the land because I'm so knowledgeable about it. First, it has a lot of important wildlife habitats. It has been easy to spot rare or species of special concern. Everybody's familiar with that sophomore project, right? In biology, my kids have all done their projects back there.
6 of them.
Yeah, you know those. So there's Jack in the Pulpits, there's lady slippers. You lift rocks, there's salamanders, okay? You can hear the hooting barred owls at night. You can hear the pecking of the pileated woodpecker. That's if you know what that is, that's the woody woodpecker with that nice bright red plume. And has a huge wingspan. It's just gorgeous, right? So it's got a delicate and it's got a very extensive wildlife habitat. Secondly, that area contains an aquifer and it has several springs that bring the groundwater to the surface. It's one of the reasons why Sean has that water coming into his basement. There's vernal pools, there's water features that crisscross the entire property, and there are 4 streams. 2 flow down a hillside and they merge to a beautiful quiet pond. Then there's one in the front, that's the one that borders Charlesview, and there's another that goes right through the middle. These 4 streams merge to form one branch of Indian Brook. And the town wetland bylaws say that wetlands have a buffers of 100 feet and perennial brooks have a boundary of 200 feet. So it's an important point that Indian Brook flows in this property, okay? Because that doubles the normal buffer zone. Okay, 200 feet now because of Indian Brook. All right. Now, I want to also give you another really important piece of information, and it's very unique topology in this land. It is like the continental divide that's in the middle of our country, because it marks a topographical divide in Massachusetts, eastern Massachusetts. At the southern end, all the water flows towards Milford and into Charlesview. On the hillside, all the remaining water flows towards the Sudbury River. So it's sort of like, the continental divide, right? The incline has a very productive spring, and it serves as a major water source for Indian Brook, and that flows through Berry Acres and finally into Ice House Pond. Any change to that slope or diversion of the groundwater at this critical topographical divide could divert the flow away from Indian Brook and away from Ice House Pond. And I think you can all imagine that pond being a mud pit. Okay, because you can eat all the water. You change the slope, you change the groundwater, it's going to flow towards the Charles River now instead. Right. Now, if you look at the topography, it also reveals that this location has a slope on this parcel. And it's, again, this one that John Kimball mentioned. And it's impossible because of that slope to mitigate the intrusive view of the solar farm from the Charles View neighborhood. You can't put any kind of screening, nothing. You still see it because it'll rise above the neighborhood. There's proof that this is true because the eyesore that currently exists behind Alexander Road is evidence that that visual impact cannot be mitigated in any way. All right. So I just want to just quickly summarize again that the Teresa Road parcel has GIS documented wetlands, contains Indian Brook, which is a known water source for Ice House Pond. And when the required wetland setbacks are considered and when the topography is considered, there is simply no contiguous section suitable for siting solar parcels on this land. And there's no way an access road could be placed on their property because again, it would go over the wetlands.
Okay, thanks, Mona. I'm gonna have to move on. All right. Oh, are you, okay. Who's next?
Rick Voss.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Rick Voss, 19 Alexander Road.
Eric.
Thank you, Mariel, for allowing me to speak. And I wanted to thank all of you, all the board members for working so tirelessly on this project. You guys have had many late nights and we sincerely appreciate it. The projected solar farms on Teresa Road does not directly affect me. I'm here on behalf of my Teresa neighbors. I want to share my experience with the Alexander Street Solar Farm. It's located directly across the street from my residence, so from my front and side yards, it is in full view. At the town meetings, we were promised an adequate buffer zone and new trees would be planted to shield the panels. Those statements could not be further from the truth. The solar panels are broadcast across the rolling hills and glare in the afternoon sun, creating an absolute eyesore even beyond the worst case scenario we had imagined. When working on my yard or pulling into my driveway, I make a conscious effort not to look in the direction of the solar farms, as it is extremely disheartening to see what it is and think back what it was. Absolute proof. Commercial solar farms need more regulation installed in residential neighborhoods. The loss of property value is immense and immeasurable. I would not want to buy in this development again because of the solar farm. To piggyback another solar farm on the Alexander Street farm would absolutely be devastating. I ask that you put yourselves in our shoes and think how this would be accepted in your own neighborhood. We need your help in saving our neighborhood. We appreciate your time and consideration. And I would also like to say that I would be in favor of the first overlay district map dated January 10th. And also the criteria for more exact regulations that will protect abutting residents and homeowners. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who's next?
Bubba and Nanny. I think that might be Tom Terry. They're unmuted.
Hello.
Hey, Tom.
Thank you very much for having me. And thank you, Madam Chair and board members for serving. I would like to echo the complaint, I guess, or the comment by Dale Danahy regarding the procedural part of this issue. And I was very surprised and happy to hear what Sean Kimball said about a study that had been done for the town of Acton, and 3 other towns or 8 other towns were included in that. If that's something that we could get by getting a phone call and a couple of emails, maybe good information to have emailed over to John, and maybe the board could gain something from it. And I don't mean to say anything that, like, the committee are not experts, a lot of the people on ZAC are on the board because they're being introduced to town politics, and they eventually become planning board members, and vice versa. They go back and forth. So I have utmost confidence in the planning board in this issue. And I know it's been a very gray issue, hard to settle on any one thing. I did enjoy hearing that this might possibly be held over to a fall meeting where we might have some head-to-head comments on specific properties. I don't think
Tom,
this year.
I just want to make sure that I'm really clear. I don't have any knowledge that town meeting will absolutely be pushed off to the fall. There is some conversation that might happen. I just want to make sure I'm clear with you.
Right, and I was just making clear that that would be my wish too, and I think the board should consider that in their infinite wisdom, if they had a chance to voice their opinion. So I guess that would be all. I would really enjoy to having some kind of a back and forth regarding my property rather than have it be over this kind of a process. If this is what's going to happen at the town meeting, you really can't single any comments out. It's very difficult. This is a bad situation. It would be a perfect time to take this article and delay it for 6 months or a year. And I'll thank you for your time, and good luck with your decision.
Thank you, Tom.
Madam Chair, could Mr. Terry provide his address again?
Oh, Tom, what's your address?
P.O. Box 162 is my mail address. My physical address is 17 Maple Street.
Thank you.
Chris Nation is next.
Hey, Chris.
Good evening, Chris Nation, 17 College Street. How are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
All right. Just a couple points. Just wanted to clear that I'm not in favor of any land right restrictions. I believe what I'm hearing is one way or another, there is going to be an overlay that will get voted on at town meeting.
So let me just clarify for you and everybody. That is not necessarily true. That has not been decided. What the public hearings are all about is getting the public's input, helping shape the decision of the planning board in its recommendations for town meeting.
Okay, and well, with that, my preference would be that there was no overlay. If there was to be an overlay, I would want the second map that was generated, which includes the 3 parcels off of Wood Street. To further that, I view that parcel as a place where the Nation family would work with the planning board, much like it has over many decades, very positively, and work to find a good balance between the landowner's rights and its abutters. And I don't know how else to say it, but that's what I would like.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris.
Good night.
Good night now.
Tom Robertson.
Hi, Tom Robertson, 15 Thornridge Road. Can you hear me?
What's your address again, sir?
15 Thornridge Road.
Yep.
And first off, I wanted to hear, I think it was Dale's iPad about the.
You are hard to understand for me, I assume for others.
Well, I guess that's perfect example of what I wanted to get across is that I think that these online meetings in this environment are, while I appreciate you trying to continue move business forward, I do feel that they are exclusionary and they are limiting the public's ability to really present their position. And so I think that you might want to reconsider this format for non-essential town business. Having said that, if you can still hear me,
I can.
I wanted to, I was going to say much of what the text that Mona Hall said concerning her property. We are abutting the Franklin solar project, and we have similar concerns with groundwater, with the wetlands being damaged, with the wildlife considerations, as well as our property values and our well water and other concerns. And towards that end, going to the solar overlay map, and the way that was put together without criteria.
There was criteria, just to be clear for the public.
Pardon me?
There was criteria in the ZAC process, just to be clear.
Well, we haven't seen that. And where is that laid out, what those criteria are?
The presentation that we had at the beginning.
I watched that presentation. It did not specify any sort of details concerning the things that Mona and I have talked about concerning the wetlands, wildlife, residential proximity, etc.
So I'm taking assiduous notes. So I'm going to add that to the list so that for the future criteria regarding wildlife concerns, wetlands, etc. Okay, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
And, okay, so not having those clear criteria to be discussing right now what you've said as far as whether specific sites should be on that plan or not be on that plan, without those criteria, it just seems like whoever's the most articulate, whether it's the developer or the abutters or whatever, that their arguments might be given a positive or a negative nod. So I don't quite understand how this process of property by property discussing whether someone should be on a map or not be on a map makes much sense. I mean, what is it? It is the quantity of people that come in a for or against, or I mean, what is the criteria for then making a decision based upon this discussion?
Sir, did you have a particular opinion on the overlay map as proposed, the original one?
Well, the original one, if you bring it up, I mean, I'm most concerned right now about the Franklin Solar project property, which I don't believe should be on it, just because someone applied for a permit. Otherwise, then any property owner that wants to be on that should quickly apply for a permit and then be granted that status. So I don't think that's an appropriate reason for anything to be on a solar map, as I laid out in my correspondence to the planning board a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, understood.
And the second thing I wanted to, so I'm clearly against it for my particular case, but I did want to say that I'm also now very much concerned that the solar overlay map for properties that have been partially developed or maybe have gotten a permit, that they should also not be included on it, as I think one of the other townspeople mentioned. Because if that project does fall through, or if there is future legislation against deforestation or whatever that precludes development, then those properties should not be given a free buy into, or the new owners towards getting a solar permit. And lastly, I wanted to make a comment concerning the fact that the planning board feels that it's handcuffed in terms of making decisions to deny solar because it is subjective. And I would say that it's the reason why a lot of these um, um, state laws and federal regulations are written in such a way to provide for subjectivity is to give the local boots on the ground, the local townspeople latitude in deciding what makes sense for their community versus what makes sense for other communities. And you and your people have and your board have the ability to make those determinations based upon the health, well-being, and mental health of the entire community. And that should not be considered that you have to not use that subjectivity. That's part of what we elected you for, and what we respect in our town board is making subjective opinions for the good of the townspeople.
Okay.
Work on this, but I do hope that you will not feel that you're not empowered to make the right decisions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Who do we have next?
Donald King.
Yes.
Donald King.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, this is Kimberly King. I am at 13 Fawn Ridge Road, and I'm an abutting property owner for the Franklin Road solar property or solar development.
Yep.
So I'm just going to read you real quick. I don't think an application for a not approved solar farm should be a part of this solar overlay. Everything's permitted, fine, but this is in a permitting phase. It's not approved. I have spoken with many towns who have dealt with this particular company, but other solar companies also, and they have put into place moratoriums, and including those in the permitting phase. I simply do not feel that something in the permitting phase should be part of the solar overlay. So I would suggest that we are very careful in this. We have the solar overlay as something that is for permitted only. And I guess that's where I would leave it. So that's my opinion. I am an abutter, and I don't feel like we are doing this quite carefully enough.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. or Ms. Puvakad, if I pronounced that correctly.
Yep, it's on. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, it's Tom and Laura Puvakad, 61 Teresa Road. I want to thank everybody for the great presentation. That was really clarified a lot of stuff that we've discussed for the last few months. We do have a prepared statement. We live in Charlesview, where the effects of an existing solar farm are a reality and can only be described as an eyesore and a blight on the neighborhood. A simple drive-by or walk would make this clear to any of you. We think it has materially affected the welfare of the neighbors directly abutting the existing solar farm on Alexander Road and the neighborhood itself. The price they can expect for their properties will be significantly reduced. The visual impact is obvious. It is impossible for many of these homeowners to enjoy their backyards anymore. They did not sign up for this. Uncontrolled, this would be repeated over and over again. Hopkinton's own commercial solar bylaws state the commercial solar installation will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or the town. However, the detrimental impact to the neighborhood already exists from the Alexander Road solar farm. We ask you to take a walking tour of Alexander Road for yourself if you haven't already. You will be horrified by the eyesore, not only on our neighborhood, but on the town of Hopkinton itself. This has caused a lot of stress for the neighbors who have to look at it every day, whether out their window or just walking by on their daily walks. No one wants to buy a house with a solar farm in their backyard. No one wants to look at it.
So why would it be a good idea to add another one? We as neighbors and abutters have to write letters and defend why properties should not be added to the overlay without additional consideration by the board. Yet we don't see any letters from the people who want their properties added. How did the additional properties qualify under the criteria for inclusion? Why don't they have to justify why they want this and what suitability it will lend to the town? Why is the burden only on the abutters and neighbors? Shouldn't there be a vetting process? Can we restrict it only to industrial and commercially zoned land, as Wellesley and Weston have done? If the zoning advisory committee left the many, many acres of land abutting Teresa Road off the overlay zone in the first place, why would we want to amend this now? They obviously did not think it was a choice for solar farms, and that seems to be a good, unbiased reason, not made by an owner, not made by an abutter. Therefore, we do not want to see any more properties added until the board reconsiders and clarifies the criteria for being added to the overlay. There needs to be a process, something more than just requesting it. We understand that this is a really difficult problem that many towns are grappling with. Our interest is entirely in avoiding what has already happened in our neighborhood being repeated again. It doesn't have to be repeated again and again. We support the overlay district, but only with the original map, not with the amended map. We thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. John, can I just check in how many people are lined up to speak?
Right now we have 4.
Okay, go ahead.
Gail Ryan is next.
Hello, Gail Ryan, 66 Teresa Road.
Hi, Gail.
Sorry. First of all, I do want to thank you for continuing these discussions. I know it's challenging times and it's not ideal. And also thank you for your proposed June meeting when it could be a public live forum if needed. And also thank you for all of you who have taken the time to read our letters and our comments and our concerns. You know, I was going to reiterate how significant of a disruption this has already been to our neighborhood with the solar farm abutting Teresa Road, abutting Alexander Road, you know, from the preservation of the land to the visual and sound barriers, to the property values, and also the safety. I think we can't underestimate the safety concerns a large-scale solar farm may have on people dwelling nearby. There is inconclusive evidence that to conclude that a solar farm poses no harm or risks to people living in close proximity. So I think, you know, we all have these, what you consider subjective feelings or that it's detrimental, but I think based on, you know, the visual effect, sound barrier, the property values, the safety concerns, and of course, the preservation of the land and the natural habitats, it's all more than just subjective, you know, feelings or opinions. So I do want to just state that I thank you for establishing a commercial overlay district. I think it's very important. I am definitely in favor of option 1, the proposed map from January, strongly opposed to the 2 parcels abutting Teresa Road. Again, I was at the March 9th meeting and, you know, I pardon my, I don't want to appear disrespectful or my, you know, misperception, but it just appeared as though they requested that the properties be added and then the map was amended. And then we were notified. So I don't know what vetting process they went through or what criteria they met. So if you could talk to that, that would be appreciated. And this really isn't a matter of not in my backyard, because I wouldn't want this in your backyard either, or in any of our other people in our community. And I think we really should look at the lessons learned from Weston, Wellesley, Falmouth, or other towns. And I thank you for reaching out to Weston and Wellesley. So I appreciate all your efforts, and I just don't want you to underestimate the impact that this has on residential neighborhoods. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Ted McNulty.
Hi, Ted McNulty.
Let me unmute.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks, Muriel, and thanks, Planning Board, for organizing this meeting. You guys have a really difficult job, and we appreciate all the work you put into this. I thought it would be
What's your,
interesting to
I'm
add a
sorry,
perspective.
excuse me, Ted, what's your address?
I'm sorry, it's 35 Alexander Road. I'm sorry,
Yep,
35
no
Alexander
worries.
Road. So I do live in Charlesview, but I thought it would be interesting to offer the perspective of somebody who is actually not an abutter. I can't see the current solar panel array on Alexander, and I won't be able to see the proposed extension of the solar farm on Teresa Road. But even though I'm not directly impacted, I really do care about this project, because the reason I care is because this project doesn't just impact the people along Teresa Road who will have solar panels installed in their backyard. As the value of the homes on Teresa Road plummet because of this project, it could negatively impact the property value of every other home in Charlesview. I also care because, like everyone else on this call, we were originally attracted to Hopkinton in general, and Charlesview in particular, because of the natural beauty of the area. And I care deeply about this town and my neighborhood. And I don't want to see their character destroyed over short-term pursuit of tax credits. But the main reason that I care is because I care about my friends, and I care about my neighbors, and I care about any other resident in town that might be impacted in the future if we don't place some restrictions on commercial solar development. And tonight, we're spending a lot of time talking about maps, legal letters, zoning guidelines. But let's remember there are real people behind each of these decisions that we're going to make, and real people are going to suffer if we don't take a common sense approach deciding where to place solar panels in this town. So I'd like to go on record to say I am in favor of the original overlay map that was dated in January that does not include the additional property behind Teresa Road. And with that, I'd like to thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Chirko.
Hi,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chirko.
Thank you. Good evening. Ben Chirko, 147 Lumber Street. I would just like to reiterate that I would appreciate to have the 2 parcels off Nancy Lane included in the second plan that was revised. And I've noticed a lot of frustration that, we came in, and myself and some other people at the last minute with the request to be added, and I appreciate that. And had I known about the ZAC, which is my own fault that I didn't, but had I been paying attention and been involved in it earlier, I would have gone forth earlier and asked to have my parcel included, as I'm sure others would have also. But that's on me, not anybody else. But that's it. I appreciate everything you're doing, and I just wanted to just put in my last request to have those 2 pieces included. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Michelle Stillwell.
Okay, Michelle.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Muriel.
Hi.
Michelle Stillwell, 63 Teresa Road. I had a nice speech prepared, but my neighbors touched on all my points before my turn, so I'll be brief. I do want to thank Ms. Larson Marlowe for that presentation. That was really good, and I feel like the slideshow and then all the board members, before we even had a chance to speak tonight, had touched on a lot of our concerns and even used the same vocabulary that we were planning on using. And so just a couple quick points. I agreed with Mr. Robertson when he said that the way the laws are written are meant to be flexible, not to tie your hands. And so when our bylaws say, and I know you can all recite this in your sleep, that it shouldn't be detrimental to the neighborhood, but detrimental is so subjective. Well, how many dollars does a person have to lose before we've determined they've suffered a detriment? I mean, if someone bought their house in the 300s 15, 20 years ago, and now it's worth in the 600s, and now with the solar panels, no young family is going to want to buy those houses. So now they're looking at what? I don't know, 400s? I mean, money's money. That's not subjective. And we can't wait for the houses to turn over before we decide, oh yeah, you were right. Now the property values really did go down. Because if you see the site, and I know Muriel, you said you did walk by, and I appreciate that. And I hope the other board members did as well. They're hideous on Alexander Road, and no young family is going to ever want to buy those houses. So they've lost these poor families that were going to retire or downsize or pay for their daughter's weddings or whatever. That money's gone and it's never coming back. And then it's going to have a ripple effect around our neighborhood. So it's not just this vague concept of property values. This is real. This is people's real lives and futures. And we've all established tonight how ugly those solar panels are when they're so close to someone's house. And when we bought our home and we had a dream of how our lives would look with kids playing in the yard, and I'm sure everyone here can relate, trees and sunshine and grass and balls, no one dreams about solar panels. So when a house goes on the market in Charlesview and they all come rushing over and it sells in one day at an open house, that's not going to happen anymore. These young families are going to come around the bend on Alexander and say, what is that? We're not moving here. That's hideous. This is real. And so I wasn't clear on whether the Franklin property is on map number 1, the January map, but I feel bad for them too. But I can only speak to the Charlesview. It's just wrong. They don't belong here, and it's real detriment that this would cause. And I thank you so much for your time. I know this is a tough, thankless job, but we do appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you for listening.
You got it. Take care. I just want to say something for the benefit of the public. Property values are indeed a concrete measure. We are not able to base our decisions on the impact to property values, so that everybody knows. Is there somebody else?
Craig Nation and Ron Nation. I will unmute Craig Nation first.
Hey, Craig.
Oh, hi. I'll start off, I guess, echoing Jane Moran, Dale Danahy.
I need your address first, Craig.
279 Wood Street.
Yep.
So I'm in favor of no map, but prefer the second map, including our Wood Street parcels, of course. I agree that solar doesn't belong in a lot of areas. Sounds like the Alexander one is, I haven't seen it personally, but from what everyone's talking about, that does sound terrible. So I agree that it doesn't belong everywhere, but I think that putting a blanket over the town, to me, doesn't feel like the right thing to do with stripping of property rights of landowners. I think the better path would be to consider modifying existing bylaws to make solar more palatable to abutters and others in town. I think that's a better path. I would caution the unintended consequences of banning solar. Be careful what you wish for. These people have property and they intend to do something with it, I'm sure, and solar may have been a better option. I just don't know. If you ban it, they're going to do something else with it. We don't know what that is. In your overlay map, I see, depending on which one you go with, I see 0 amount of feasible land in the overlay for any future solar development. And I would love for someone to explain how this protects health, safety, or welfare and does not directly flaunt Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3, as the town council letter warns. And just wanted to end saying, I also agree this format's very difficult to follow. I know many people who would like to have their land included, and I feel like this format is exclusionary. I understand that there was several ZAC meetings. Not everybody pays attention to that all the time. They just assume their property rights are safe and secure, and they're not always following along as they should to see which rights are going to get stripped from them this year. And it comes out here at the last minute, and now people are scrambling to get in line. And that seemed like an option at one of the meetings we went to. It was suggested to bring other parcels forward for discussion, and now it seems like, oh, just kidding, we don't We don't want to hear about them anymore. We just want to jam this through here. And I just think, to me, this feels rushed. I know it's been going on for a while, but especially now with everything going on, it's tough to include everybody in this. And that's all. I guess the only question I have is to explain how this doesn't directly flaunt the Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3, as the town council letter warns. I haven't heard you guys really bite into that letter very much, I think. That's all for now. Have a good night.
Thanks, Craig.
Sure.
Ron Nation.
Hey, good evening, Ron Nation, Smith Road, Hopkinton. Hi Muriel, hi Planning Board.
Hi, Ron.
Nice night. I've the parcels, the three parcels that we're talking about, the Nation family, as Chris puts it, we're able to build a solar farm over there, a solar panel array or whatever, and not interfere with anybody. It's my belief that we can build that. There's 38 acres, and the solar panels would probably take 20. There'd be 18 acres. We could give to open space. There's a buffer, a natural buffer all around the thing, other than 495, which I don't think too many people are posted looking at solar panels driving down 495. They're kind of here and there, but so that's one thing. I think it's an ideal site for a solar farm. No one's gonna. I think we can build it without anybody seeing it, even in the winter. We've been up there. Craig and I have been up there, and it's a natural. And then, so there's that. And then I've go along with, many people have mentioned that, that maybe this could be put off, and, that just put it off, or at least get it so we can have a public hearing and present something, some kind. I'd love to show how my parcel is harmless to abutters. And it won't be offensive at all. But yet here I am, thrown in under that net, and it's a little annoying. So that's all. I'd go for the extension to set it off and for next year, or whenever there's a real time to have real public hearings. It is difficult. This stuff is it's all pretty common for you guys, but for us, I would have loved to have brought plans tonight, but I can't put them on this little thing. A lot of people are on phones, probably. You can't see them. I had 3 days to prepare them. I think the solar overlay district, the criteria is nice to have. I don't know when I think it just came out. Well, some of it just came out at the last meeting, but I never saw the ZAC stuff, so maybe that's my problem. Anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, thanks so much, Ron.
All your time, as always.
I appreciate it. Take care. Is there anybody else, John?
Yes, Beth is unmuted, and then Mary has her hand raised.
Okay, Beth.
Yes, I have a question.
Wait, Beth, who, from where?
Beth Cameron, 70 Teresa Road.
Thank you.
And I have a question. It was mentioned a few minutes ago that we cannot include property values when considering a zoning criteria. And could you explain that a little bit?
In the planning board process, when we are hearing, when something is allowed by zoning and allowed by bylaws, and we are in a public hearing process, whether or not it is or is perceived to be detrimental to property values is not a consideration that we are able to weigh.
Okay. And I would like to respond to, I think it was Mr. Nation who mentioned 40A Section 3. And in that, it discusses we can regulate to protect public health, safety, and welfare. And I would ask that there's consideration to, there's actually many ways that this would negatively impact the welfare of our residents and community. One of those is financial welfare.
The bylaw?
Hold on, Frank. We're gonna all have our chance.
I'm just asking for clarification.
Yep, he had mentioned MGL 40A Section 3.
That's Mass General Law.
Which is the Massachusetts statutes. And it specifically says that the town and planning board can regulate to protect public health, safety, and welfare.
That's correct.
And I'm suggesting and asking you to consider that there are multiple ways that a project such as this, a commercial project in a residential area, negatively impacts the welfare of our residents and our community. And one of those ways is the financial welfare and security, and in part that's due to property values. But there's also the emotional health and welfare, the loss of the beautiful natural surroundings that we purchased to be around, the visual impact of having a daily landscape with that someone described as glaring metal and glass. Someone on Alexander that has to look at it every day. And then there's, the not clearly understood health risks, both now and in the future, as solar farms age. There's many ways that welfare is impacted that could be considered under that 40A Section 3 that he described. And actually, in the policy guidance for that solar energy systems, the document that's prepared to help understand the statutes, it actually states that. It states that due to the size and impact that a higher degree of municipal control over the location and permitting of such systems may not be inconsistent with Chapter 40A, Section 3. So I just wanted to make that clear to, I believe it was Mr. Nation that brought that up, that I think these things are things that we, the community, and the board should consider.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then Mary?
I just wanted to give credit where credit is due, all the nice comments about the presentation, primarily due to Deb Feinberg's efforts to add detail that I was skipping over. So thank you very much, Deb.
Yes, Deb, thank you very much. Both of you, great job.
One more for Brian
okay.
Parrish also raised his hand.
Okay, Brian.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much for recognizing me. This is Brian Paris at 68 Teresa Road. I had plenty to say, but as Michelle said, all our neighbors talked about all the cogent points. And I guess I wanted to make sure you folks know that what you've seen is kind of a roll call of all the neighbors abutting this proposed solar development farm. And what you're seeing is that we are united in our opposition to the development of the solar farm on those two parcels. So I think you need to understand that every one of our neighbors has spoken tonight. Everyone has spoken in opposition, and everyone has detailed and specific reasons for not wanting it, whether it's visual, whether it's health related, whether it's flooding, whether it's watershed, whether it's wildlife. There are plenty of reasons. You don't need to hear them again, but I stand in support and I stand with my neighbors and friends in opposition. So that said, I would support the creation of an overlay district, clearly, and I support map number 1, the January map. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Can I recommend to the board that we table this discussion here from Mr. Garabedian and then come back to it?
Madam Chair, Gail Ryan also raised her hand just now. I don't know if you want to take this.
So who?
Gail Ryan.
Gail Ryan. Okay.
So Amy Peterson, who hasn't spoken yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see people. I don't know how you see people, Amy. Go ahead.
Would you like to take one?
Yep. Go ahead.
Gail Ryan is unmuted.
All right, I'm going to take these two more, and then I'm going to address Mr. Garabedian's article so that we don't run out of time.
Thank you. I'm Gail Ryan, 66 Teresa Road. And I just wanted to reference one thing that hasn't come up tonight. That is the Town of Hopkinton's master plan from 2017. And I briefly read through it, and there seemed to be a recurring theme that is totally aligned with all of our rationale for not putting in commercial solar overlay districts that abut residential neighborhoods. And if I can just mention the bullet points. One is to protect open space and natural resources. Another is to encourage commercial and industrial uses that are compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. Another is to preserve and enhance large tracts of privately owned open land in agricultural, recreational, or undeveloped use, to limit commercial creep and protect residential neighborhoods. So when talking about land use goals, the master plan specifically calls for an action plan that minimizes visual impacts, retains rural features, and minimizes site disturbances. So I think, the town of Hopkinton's the master plan is aligned with many of our sentiments that we echo tonight. So thank you for letting me just mention that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Amy Peterson.
Amy Pearson unmuted now.
Hi, I'm Amy Peterson, 36 Fruit Street.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, thank you for taking time to listen to me tonight. I would request that this meeting does get postponed until a time where we can all come together. And a lot easier, as everybody else mentioned. I'm not going to belabor the points, but we all know that. We own a parcel at 36 Fruit Street, approximately 27 acres. It is located off the beaten path, and we'd request that our parcel be considered in the overlay district. There's ample spacing for visual screening. We are a distance from residential neighborhoods. We meet several of the criteria that was listed in the ZAC meeting. And on the second overlay district plan, our parcel does abut, and it's kind of incorporated in the town property that was included in the overlay district. So we'd like to be considered in that district.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go to Tom, and we'll come back to the solar. Hi, Tom.
Good evening.
Did we hear anything from the DPW on the trash pickup question?
No.
So does anybody have any questions or comments or further discussion for the trash pickup question? Jane?
Yeah, I had one. I know in all of these condominiums and townhouses, when we do go through this process, it is incumbent upon the homeowners associations to include those costs in their, their rental. And I'm just wondering if we vote to include Tom's suggestion that we take this incumbent upon us, what would the cost be to the town, say, if then Legacy Farms or some of these other larger condominiums come forward and want to be included on a piggyback? What would the cost be to the town at that point in time? I think that might be something for DPW to answer.
Yep. I agree. Amy, you had a question or comment?
I did. I had a question. The town council recommended that the language read, rather than to require the town to be responsible for trash and recycling, but to not right now it says that shall not provide, and town
Right.
council's suggestion was just to remove it entirely. So it's neither way. And I wondered if the citizens petitioner agreed with town council's recommendation.
It's a question for you, Tom.
Well, the request of the petitioner is to have the town provide. So I'm not sure that a change that makes it optional for the town to provide is really in concert with what the rest of the people who were signers to the petition would agree with.
Okay.
I mean, it seems to me that it's either the town provides or the town doesn't provide. Whichever way the town decides would seem to make more sense to me.
Okay, but the town council was concerned it wouldn't pass the attorney general muster, correct? That we couldn't compel the town to require it. Okay.
Yeah.
But there are many communities. Well, again, I know that there are many communities that do provide it. I don't know how their zoning bylaws are worded to accomplish that.
Okay. And then my question is, right now we have a lot of these developments already approved, and do we know, or could we find out, would they all of a sudden would be required to supply that for them too? That might be Jane's point as well.
Yeah. And I think that's why we were, at least that's what I was thinking. I wanted to hear from DPW about what is the overall big impact if a change like this is made.
All right, so maybe for next time.
Anybody else on the planning board have questions? Comments? Mary?
So I just wanted to clarify, is John going to get DPW comment or have them come to the next meeting?
I will talk to him on the phone.
Okay.
Gary is trying to comment, but is I think he's muted.
Oh,
He's not muted.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe he muted himself.
Gary, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just waiting for my turn.
Okay. Oh, you're my favorite.
I just had through the chair, I had a question for Mr. Garabedian. You had mentioned in your comments last week that you were requesting that we simply revert back to previous language in our bylaws, but per Amy's research, it sounds like the previous language didn't allow for garbage or provide garbage pickup to condominiums and garden apartments. So I'm just wondering if you can clarify exactly what you're requesting, and because I'm just a little confused on what you're doing, what you're requesting.
So Amy is correct, and I did double check with some of the other associations. They have not had garbage pickup in the past, even prior to the zoning bylaw change. And so my original comments was what represented a misstatement. Really, this is a matter of equitable treatment. I'm not aware that we benefit in any way from a reduction in our property tax as a result of those services being withheld from condominium associations. And so I think as a matter of equitable treatment in light of the taxes that we pay, that the waste pickup and recycling should be delivered to condominiums just as they are provided to single family residences.
Anybody else on the planning board? Do we have anybody in the audience that is here to speak to this?
No one's hand is currently raised.
All right. Tom, if you're amenable, I'm going to recommend that we wait to hear from DPW at the very least. And so we'll continue this to a future hearing. You're certainly welcome to stay.
No objection from my part.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen of the planning board, the ever easy conversation about solar overlay districts can commence. So what I think I want to do is just, we have 20 minutes before 10 o'clock. Can we go around one at a time and just get your concise feelings at this moment about the process, the way forward, what your recommendation is for this article for town meeting, just to get a sense of where everybody is right now after the conversations from the public. Gary, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. I think first and foremost, I think it's while some people may have been challenged by the technology, this has been a widely participated in meeting. So I thank everyone that has taken the time over multiple hearings to call in and listen to the conversation. For me personally, I think it's really important that we move forward with a thoughtful solar overlay like what's been laid out with Zach. So personally, I am supportive of moving forward with I think what's now known as Map One, and I think it's important that we outline a process in the future so that if other parcels want to be added to that overlay, then there is a process by which they can do that.
Okay, Jane.
Oh, thank you. This is a tough one. It comes down to, for me, what I know this is the basis of the zoning and Zach, but it's tricky when you impede on people's personal private property rights and what they can do with it and what they can't do with it. And I know that there's a lot that we can do with planning board that maybe we haven't really looked at, you know, with different plantings and different shrubbery and different, so that we can protect everybody's rights. And I do agree that there are some solar construction farms out there that have not been handled very well, that probably could have been handled differently. I think we've got a great start on some of the criteria that we need to look at as far as what we want to do as a town and what we don't want to do. I don't know if we're really there yet. And then the other thing that I think we have to consider is just the basic fundamental value of preserving solar, and the advice that town council has given us, that the way that the language is presented right now probably will not pass muster and needs some further consideration, which I think the planning board is doing a good job taking on at this time. So at this point in time, I think that I would not be in favor of going forward with any language or supporting this this bylaw proposal at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Mary sent a concise layout of the 5 different options or 6 different options that the board has been talking about. Would it help to put that up on the screen?
No, not right this second, actually, but thank you. Thank you, Mary, for that. Mary, do you want to go next?
Sure. I definitely struggle with the concept of property rights. But at the same time, it does need to be balanced by the property rights of abutters. We have long been looking for ways to exert some town control over the placement of solar farms. And I certainly agree that we could debate this further, but I don't think that we will gain a lot from debating it further. I think we need to put an overlay district into place. I would like to discuss and include a way for parcels to be added. I think if we go forward with a map that's similar to the March map with additional parcels, or even the additional parcels that were added after that fact, or proposed to be added, I should say, after March, I think that there's no way that this will pass town meeting, because there will be at least 1 or 2 parcels that each individual voter doesn't like. So I think we need to start with a pretty clean overlay map. And I think we need to get it into place in order to put some control around this solar, these solar installations. I would like to really see developers look at doing the solar on roofs and parking structures, that sort of thing. I just think that ground-based solar is going too far. It's we've just seen a proliferation, and it needs to take a breather.
So you are at this time in favor of map 1.
Map 1, potentially with deletion of certain parcels that are not yet developed.
Okay.
Would be grandfathered, for current.
All right. Frank?
Can I go last?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I'm in preference of map 2. I think that we asked.
I just want to be really clear for the public and everybody. Map 2 would be the original proposed overlay district with the addition, a parcel we haven't talked about yet tonight, Fruit Street, the town-owned Fruit Street property, and the 2 parcels off Nancy Lane and the 3 parcels off Wood Street. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Because we also have asked developers or landowners if they would like to be included. And I do not like that all of a sudden they won't be included after we've asked them. But Jane has summarized my position on this 100%. I 100% back everything she said about this. And I think there's better ways to do what we need to do. When Mary says, well, we've gone too far, or solar farms have gone too far afield of what? What is the metric you're using? Is it too many trees are being cut down? Well, let's look at that in a bylaw that can say, like other towns have done, where you say you can only clear cut so many acres of trees or whatever it is. And like has been pointed out by a developer, you don't know what you're going to get if you don't have solar panels. What if there's people want to construct and neighbors can say, I don't want to look at a building. I don't want to look at solar panels. I don't want to look at this or that. Well, if something isn't done to the letter of the law that we have, and I think we have a very good solar bylaw, by the way, we can come to the board, ask us, work with the town, work with your neighbors. What isn't being done by Alexander Road, for instance, that you like to see done, that should have been done, that isn't done? And I think everything's been done, and it could be, if something could be done better, let's learn from it. Right now, frankly, I'm just hearing not in my backyard, and that's not a reason for anything. So I'm a little bit frustrated, but I think the process should include the newer map.
Okay, thank you so much, Frank. Amy.
Okay, so I am generally, I think that we should move forward with some kind of limited map for the solar overlay district. So if you start with the base of map 1, I think that we might want to go ahead and remove Franklin and Wilson Street, because I wouldn't have approved them there except that they met the criteria and we had to approve. Let's see. Oh, and also I wasn't on the board when the East Main Street one was voted, but I think that's worth considering as well, removing that or removing the parts that don't currently have solar. And I would consider keeping the Wood Street Whisper Way ones on the table at this point, because it doesn't appear that they have abutters that are upset about them, and that so it may not be very near anyone. At least there's 3 different parcels. One of them, some of them seem to be near Valleywood. So I guess I would like to discuss that a little bit further, the Wood Street in the future. But generally, map 1 with some adjustments. And I want to echo Mary's concerns. I'm really worried about this passing at town meeting at all, because 2/3 vote is really hard to get. And so if nothing passes, then we're back to the drawing board where like it's allowed in every district with very limited control by the planning board. So would like to get something that can go forward that can pass, which worried about that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Deb?
I really appreciate everybody's weighing in. I just want to say that I think everybody's given it really careful consideration. I too would be leaning towards map 1 with the removal of the properties that were listed.
I'm just going to ask you to be explicit, just so, because
there's
removal of what properties?
It's the East Main in particular. And what was the other one?
The ones that Amy mentioned were the Wilson Street and the Franklin, the Liberty Mutual property, and the one that is between Cedar and Wilson.
The thoughts that I had were more in relationship to the map where it had grown exponentially, where it wasn't necessary. For example, cleaning up East Main, where the East Main one showed more than what was allotted to it originally. So just cleaning up the edges of it. I didn't write it down, but I can get that to you. But the East Main was one of them.
Okay. I just want to be, I'm just trying to be clear. I'm not challenging you on it. I'm just trying to be clear.
There's 2 places somebody else had mentioned, and I have to look in my notes.
Okay.
To keep it short for everybody. But I am in favor of a solar map district, because I feel, as Mary does, that I think the sort of the our overriding Hopkinton theory of in our master plan has exploded. I just don't think we're respecting what was laid out in the original plan, and how even though we are an agrarian community, we grew to a shoe factory community, and now we're a commuter community, and so we're growing again. So we're shrinking and growing, but I think in what the secret that Hopkinton has is the land. The secret that we have, we want to keep, because it's beautiful, it's irreplaceable. And I think that having some sort of map in place will show that we respect that. And that's what I would like to put forth. But in due respect to landowners that would like to be considered, I would like to put it forward that Zach next year come up with a plan B. So I'd like to say, well, this is plan A, and we're going to restrict it this way. But plan B, we are going to really look at the criteria again and have a part B. We just don't have that part this year. So I would like to start with something and have it grow, but have a consensus that these are the areas that fit that criteria. I would really like to have more time to look at some of the more successful communities, particularly the Falmouth one, that is understood as being somewhat more restrictive. So that's not saying that the nation property isn't appropriate. It's just saying that we might have to have a special lens that we look at it through. But respectfully, that's my opinion right now.
Thank you. Okay, Dave.
Yes, so map 1, everything that's built should stay on it, and 495.
So that would, you're taking off now Wilson Street, Wood Street, Franklin, and Wilson.
No, Wilson's already built. Is Wilson built yet? Have they cleared?
No.
Okay. Then yeah, I would take that one off. So just to elaborate a little bit, I mean,
yeah,
we should really be looking out for the interests of the town. We have 3 interests, right? It's the public, the developer, and the town. And, the character of our town, you've heard many of the residents say tonight, what our character of our town is like. And I feel strongly to keep that going. What I heard tonight was many, many voices against solar, because, and I think when that does go to town meeting, I think people will realize that it could happen to them too. So I think it will get a lot of support and it will pass.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, you're referring to Mechanic Street, not Wood Street, correct?
Thank
For
you.
map one?
Yeah, I do think of it as Wood Street, but you are correct. It is Mechanic Street. I appreciate that.
So yeah, Mechanic. So Mechanic, Wilson, and Liberty. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, Franklin Road.
Yeah.
Okay. Rob,
Madam Chair,
let's hear from Rob, okay, and then we'll come back.
So I think my comments at the beginning kind of have played out in real time here.
Yep.
We definitely need a solar overlay district. We've had 5 that have been approved with no, because we can't stop them. We can't value property values going down. We've had 10 properties that have looked been added, and more just want to be added in this meeting. You look at Alexander Road, I'm looking at here on my monitor, 2 houses that abut the solar farm are the 2, according to Zillow, they're the 2 lowest valued properties on Alexander Road. And the other one across the street is the 3rd. So 3 of the lowest priced homes or valued homes on Zillow are right there next to the solar farm. It's real to all the people that live there. It's very meaningful. Very bad situation for them. We definitely need a solar overlay district. I'm a proponent of map 1 and removing as to start the Mechanic Street, Franklin Road, the other one that Dave just said, Wilson Street. I would even probably I'd go along that with that for consensus, but I'd even be more restrictive. And the solar farms that exist are going to still exist. We can't take away, and any in-process approvals are going to still go forward. We can't block them with a solar overlay district, but I'm of the mind we should limit it. But I also agree with what Deb said. There should be some more work to put into this in future over the next year. I do think there are places that aren't on that map that might make sense, but right now it's a runaway train, and we have to stop the train from crashing into people's homes and ruining their property value.
Okay. Just for the record, because we're all saying where we stand, I am a proponent of map 1, the original overlay district as proposed. I too don't think that the town really wants solar anywhere. And I think we are starting to see in real time the impacts that it can have with commercial, not just commercial creep, but commercial landing in the middle of residential districts. I am a proponent of taking Frankland and Wilson off the map. However, I'm also a proponent of predictable process, and I would support the original overlay district map flat and look at making changes to it with the process we delineate going forward, whether that means taking properties off or adding properties to it. So I am just throwing it out there to the members of the board that it is almost 10 o'clock. And so I really want to know, my personal feeling is that I would like to continue the zoning questions to either the May 18th, but my preference would be June 1st to see if we can have the meeting in public with the public able to be together in a physical location. And that doesn't mean that we can't, people can't still be working, studying, researching this and coming up with a more formal approach, but to continue the public hearing at least till May 18th, which is our last meeting in May.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
I'm supportive of that too, Miro.
Okay.
Yeah,
I appreciate the public's time. I appreciate the planning board's time. This is a challenge. Zoning changes are a challenge, and I appreciate that a lot of people are putting some thoughtful work into it. Mary and Deb, that presentation was really, really helpful, and I think that we need to just stay the course there and make sure that we have presentations in place when we talk about it again. I think that, I don't know if anybody else noticed that I was taking notes. I think that 9 of us have 9 different feelings about the map. And that is, the reason the public hearings are important for a lot of reasons, and this is one of them. We start to understand how people perceive and react to and understand a proposed change that we're going to take forward. And it's really helpful to prepare for town meeting when the time comes. So I would entertain a motion to continue the public hearings on the zoning article. Oh, can I ask this question first? How do people feel about not entertaining? So we have we have noticed people about the properties off Nancy Lane and Fruit Street and the properties off Wood Street. I think we have to make a decision that we can't extend the map beyond that, but we didn't even talk about that particularly. Does that make sense to people that we can't at this point continue to add parcels for this year's town meeting under consideration for the zoning overlay?
I support that.
I agree. We could reconsider if town meeting is moved to fall.
I think so too, and particularly if the warrant is open. And I think that it's an invitation for us to keep working on this issue because it is complicated. But if we are aiming for a June town meeting with this warrant and June town meeting, I don't think we can entertain any additional properties. And so I appreciate that. Okay.
At town meeting, someone could make an amendment, discuss an amendment. They can propose an amendment if they feel strongly enough to do so.
They can, Rob. I want to be really careful about taking that approach for people. I just want people to understand from my perspective, I don't think that they would be able to add properties because it's outside of the 4 corners of the map and it hasn't been noticed to people.
Okay.
I just don't think it works.
I think they could remove but not add.
I think they could remove but not add as well. And that's actually a decision that the moderator would make. And that.
Did we tell him he could go home?
I know. I mean, that's the moderator's call on a town meeting process, whether or not something falls within the 4 corners or not.
Mike Sullivan has raised his hand. I don't know if you want to.
So I'll give it 2 minutes to Mike Sullivan, but then we're going to close the meeting.
I'll take less. I just want to make a comment in case I realize this is being televised, and also if the press is covering this. I heard somebody say that a number of people spoke out against solar. Seriously, I didn't hear anybody speak out about solar. And I also heard somebody say that they were concerned about impeding the rights of the landowner. And I just want to remind everybody, seriously, if you lived in this neighborhood, homeowners are landowners also. So, that balance is important. And I think your discussion was wonderful. The explanation was wonderful. I like the way you're coming down on this. So, let's go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Miro, for clarity, I think he might have been speaking to my comment.
I'm sorry, say it again, Dave.
I had said that I heard a number of people speak out against solar. And what I meant to say is I heard a number of people speak out against solar farms because I have solar on my roof, as you are aware, and I'm totally for solar.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make, and that none of us made, but we've all said many times before, we're very much a proponent of solar, and that's not what this is about, but the commercial solar farms within residential districts is the real challenge.
So thank you, Mike, for pointing that out.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to continue this public hearing, these public hearings, right? These are 2 public hearings, to May 18th.
Madam Chair, it's 3 public hearings.
It's 3. Thank you. 3 public hearings, all the public hearings. To May 8th. Oh, what about Maspinock? What they wanted, we already did them. Never mind. Okay, 3 public hearings.
Gary Trendle, so moved.
Amy Ritterbush, second.
Okay.
Do you have a minute to talk about it? Can we just discuss the
Deb, make your point. Go ahead.
I just think that May 18th is too early for a public meeting, that if we wanted to make some of the disgruntled people who need some work with their computer skills and their automation, that just pushing it off to the June meeting might be more amenable to them.
I'm comfortable with, are you comfortable going to June 1, Gary, with your motion?
Yes, I'll amend my motion to continue to June 1st.
Amy, you still okay?
I do. I would second that.
Okay.
Question is, town meeting is the 10th or something?
The 22nd.
22nd, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Frank? Oh, Rob. Yeah.
I feel like town meeting could be a moving target date-wise. Is there any way to get it on the agenda on almost a rolling fashion, depending on when we could get an actual in-person meeting prior to town meeting? Like every time we have to decide, it's almost like, well, we want to have it when we can all meet in person prior to town meeting, but because of the current coronavirus and COVID issue, we don't know when that is.
Yeah. I think that we have to at least aim for June 1 because we think that town meeting is June 22nd, if at all possible. But I take your point. I think that we can, if we're still in this mode and we know that town meeting is being pushed off, we can continue it at the beginning so that people don't necessarily spend their time waiting for the discussion, and we just press it forward, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. By roll call, all those in favor, Muriel Kramer, yes. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Amy?
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
Frank?
Frank Durso, yes.
Gary?
Gary Trendle, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Gary Trendle, so moved.
Amy Ritterbush, second.
And by voice vote, Muriel Kramer, yes. Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Deborah?
I have just one comment, if I might. I'm a little concerned about the public meeting and our assumption of how we're going to be having meetings in the future. From what I understand, some of the future meetings may be 10 people only in a space, just so that that's not too far away from people's minds, that there may be limited open meetings, and we may need to take it, like Rob says, as a case-by-case situation as it comes up.
And what's your vote on adjournment?
I'm ready. Yes.
Mary? Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Amy?
Amy Ritterbush, yes.
Frank?
Frank Durso, yes.
Gary?
Gary Trendle, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Be safe out there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Night.
Bye.